Exactly. That's the point.
That's the
because
point.
you said by Friday, Friday being the threshold, could have been yesterday, could have been today, could
All
be
right,
tomorrow.
so by Friday then technically means before Friday. So if it's not 1,000 today, you lose.
Why not tomorrow?
You can't change
Even
tomorrow in the
tomorrow-
middle of the game.
tomorrow is Thursday.
Yes, if it's
Eric.
not 1,000 by tomorrow's announcement, lost.
You can't
yeah.
change the rules in the middle
We're
of
not
the
changing
game.
the rules.
This
We
is
just-
corruption.
we just-
Do you
we-
see?
we-
This
This
is how
is
it
how it
happens.
starts.
Yes.
Exactly.
This is what
fidelity
happens.
to the
And
language.
you're here pointing
by
fingers
Friday
at the
means
political elites.
before Friday.
But you're in the practice, knee deep in the mud, my friend.
By Friday. So let's stick with what you said. By Friday, right? You have today and tomorrow.
I plead the fifth.
Go to the border. Start testing the people yourself. Anyway, what's our number today?
All right. Well, based on what we saw yesterday, the numbers in Kenya, 963 is what we are at in Kenya right now. There was a whole hullabaloo of, quite a number of truck drivers who were tested and found positive yesterday and then sent back to Tanzania. Were not allowed to enter Kenya. So now the question is, for those who are being sent back and forth, whose tally then do they go to?
Like the Tanzanians are not ours.
Yes. And
Right?
yes.
Yeah.
So that number is not included
But you say
here.
if it's our testing kits, then that's why
We
we're
should-
counting them.
We should tally them.
We should actually tally them as part of here.
Yeah, because
But
we are the
right
ones
now
who've
they're
tested.
it's not being done like
It's just
that.
that we know that there are people who have tested positive from our kits.
Who are not Kenyans.
Yeah.
for sure.
But they're not costing us anything in terms of treatment.
We've still tallied. Actually, we've tallied many other nationalities from the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak in the country, pandemic in the country, where we had Burundians, I think we had Cameroonians at some point,
But you see, those ones
Nigerians.
were here. They were tested within the border of Kenya. These truck drivers are being tested at the border.
No man's land.
Yeah. And then they're being sent back.
Then maybe we should have a tally of no man's land.
I think so, because look at what's happening in other countries. I mean, you have a tally of the army, for example, the U.S. Army, and off different bases. You have a tally of a cruise ship, and that's not counted regardless of where they're from. That's a tally on its own. You have a tally of the prisons. The United States, for example, their tally does not include federal prisons, regardless of what state they are in. So, I mean, that would make sense to have a separate territory than where you're counting and tallying from.
Yes.
Because nobody's claiming these folks, right?
Yes.
Kenya is not claiming them. Tanzania is
It's
not
not
claiming
claiming
them, regardless of where they're from. So, I mean, it's happening in different parts where you have territories that they're demarcating that testing towards. So it might be interesting to have that as well. Because
Yep.
then, for future purposes, then you could say that these were the spots whereby we saw heightened cases, elevated cases after testing, truck drivers, border towns, no man's land, for example. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 924 or 928.
963.
I'm looking at I'm actually looking at the balance. How many you need?
We only need 27.
37.
37.
37, sorry. And so we're going to be there. Look, prepare, and forget the sausage story, all right?
2 sausages.
And a beer.
We're not boarding. Sorry.
Sorry.
2 mutaikagwes. It's a package. Beer biri. Na sausage.
I am silent on that one.
That's what the sausages are now called. All right. Globally.
All right, let's look at the global numbers. We're at 4.8 million. So it's 4 million. More than 4,986,332. Inching very close to the 5 million mark. It's likely that we'll be there at the end of today. We're just shy of 5 million by about 14,000 cases. And looking at the numbers that seem to be rolling out from the US, it's likely that the US is going to bump up those numbers and will be clear 5 million by tomorrow. Still 324,910 deaths with 1,958,496 recoveries. Now I'm looking at specific countries where we see heightened, still looking at Central America, border country with the United States. Mexico specifically yesterday, or rather within the last 24 hours, within the last 6 hours, worrying numbers now. They have recorded 2,713 cases in the last 6 hours. And still looking at that being ramped up, and they're now worrying that their caseload might get higher and higher as they go along. Still looking at the fact that they border the U.S. from Texas and Arizona and New Mexico, but they have not been taking this very seriously up until now. With the testing that they see, a lot more cases having been reported coming out of there. Russia, almost at 300,000 cases now, with 2,837 deaths. Now, this is strange because we saw the UK having gotten to number 2 about 5 days ago, but Spain has come back and surpassed the cases that we see in Spain, however, has not surpassed the number of deaths of the UK. So Spain is back up at 278,803 cases with 27 deaths, with the UK at 246,618 with 35,341 deaths. So in terms of caseload, Spain has come back to number 3, but with, yes.
On Monday, Spain was 277, UK was 243.
Yes.
So it was still ahead at 270s.
But in terms of deaths, the UK had at some point passed Spain in terms of deaths, and still much higher.
At 34,000 on Monday,
Yes.
and today they're at
35,341.
and Spain deaths were 27,600 on Monday. Today they're at
27,778.
Okay.
So just an increase of about 100 and so odd deaths in Spain. All right. So if we're looking at China, still steady at 82,000. They seem to be moving on with life. They had reintroduced the lockdown and are now looking at opening again. And it's likely to see that they will do that. South Africa, 17,200 cases. On Monday, we were at 15,000, so they've increased by about 2,000 or so cases. And the deaths are still at 312, not moving very fast there, which is a good thing. Egypt at 13,484 cases. And then just going down the line in Africa, Algeria at 7,377, Morocco at 7,023, Nigeria at 6,401, Ghana at 6,096. And the numbers more or less giving us what we expected at around this time. Sudan at 2,728, Senegal at 2,617. Senegal, interestingly enough, we know that the testing has been rigorous. We know that they have this rapid $20 test, $10 test, $1 test in some cases. So it goes across board from 20 to 10 to $1. But still, the caseload is quite low, 2,617.
Theirs is the antibody test, is it?
Yes, it is. It's not the complete test, as Dr. Mercy was telling us about. So it's just testing for the presence of, in this case.
Yeah, but if you look at Senegal, they've done 24,000 tests in total. 24,599. For them to get a caseload of 2,617, for me, that's significant. It means there's quite many people who are infected, because if you compare with Kenya, for example, we've done 46,000. We're almost at 1,000 cases. So double the number of tests and less, almost by half the number of cases. So the caseload in Senegal, I would be concerned about it is high.
Could it be because they're doing antibodies? Maybe the body is just fighting something else.
Well, the antibody testing just tells you so and so had an infection. That's about it. But I will check. But I would expect that they're also doing the PCR test.
Once you have the antibody goes positive, then they check whether it's.
No, if you have the antibody positive, it doesn't make sense to do the PCR testing to check if the virus is there, because it means already you've been infected and you're fighting it. But ideally, both the antibody testing and the antigen testing should happen concurrently. Reason being, one, you want to know who actively has the infection. that is why you do the PCR testing to identify the DNA of the virus. So the antibody just tells you who is likely to be immune and in what area. So you're able to make a decision on issues of de-escalating or escalating measures, because then you would know a certain group of people or a certain community has developed the immunity against the coronavirus. So for me, these numbers in Senegal are worrying.
But still, even with all the talk of, Senegal has rolled out rapid testing, mass testing, very cheap, they're still at 24,000.
I think what has happened is we have misused the word mass testing. Because remember, even here in Kenya, we said now we are doing mass testing. But there's never been any mass testing. It's been targeted testing for certain high-risk groups.
Masses.
Yes, groups. Because mass testing would mean you walk out of here, walk by a place, either drive through, random people, everyone is getting tested. So I think we've misused the word mass testing. We just stick with the rapid testing, because even the rapid testing, as you can see from the numbers in Senegal, are still very low.
Yeah, those are very low numbers, actually.
Very
I would have expected
numbers.
that, with all that talk of it's cheap, so it's easy to deploy, and it's being more widely spread, we should be having 100,000 tests.
Or even more.
Or
more.
Look at South Africa. They have 488 million tests so far. For 15,000...
17,000 now cases.
Yeah.
Let's take a break, take a look at weather, and then we come back and look at the numbers, especially around us, and what that means for us as a region and how Africa is fighting COVID-19. Good morning. This is A Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation at 18 minutes after 6.
...24/7, around the world, non-stop. This is Spice FM. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo-soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM.
All right, mostly cloudy conditions in Nairobi this morning. We'll see highs of 24 and lows of 15. High chance of rain in the afternoon. We'll see what that looks like later. Taking a look then into Nyeri at 16 degrees. It's mostly cloudy. Chances of rain there as well. Likely to be a wet afternoon with highs of 23 and lows of 16. Nakuru's clear skies this morning at 14 degrees is what was expected. Rain showers expected. Highs of 24 and lows of 14. 13 degrees and partly cloudy in Eldoret, highs of 23 and lows of 12. Kisumu at 20 degrees this morning is clear. However, there will be rain in the afternoon with highs of 28 and lows of 15. Cloudy in Mombasa and promising rain very early today, highs of 27. Malindi will see highs of 28 with rains in the afternoon where it's very cloudy now. Chances of rain also early this morning. Taking a look into East Africa and Kampala at 19 degrees is partly cloudy. We'll see rain showers later with highs of 26 and lows of 19. It's mostly cloudy at 22 in Dar es Salaam. Thunderstorms are expected for the afternoon. Taking a look down into Johannesburg at 8 degrees, it's clear skies. Sunny conditions all through with highs of 21 and lows of 7. Clear skies in Lagos at 26 degrees. We'll see highs of 32 and lows of 26. Taking a look into London at 14 degrees. It's warming up in this part of the world. Clear skies all through with highs of 27. High for London and lows of 13. In New York, it's about 11 p.m. We'll see clear skies. When the sun does come up at 13 degrees, highs of 19 and lows of 11. And taking a look finally into Paris, clear skies at 14 degrees, we'll see highs of 28 and lows of 14.
Twenty-two minutes after 7. This is the situation. Kenya's biggest conversation. The live stream is after
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Today's proverb. This one. It's from Morocco. Instruct a man.
Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
That's what I've been saying. That's what I've been saying.
Agreed. Endorsed. Fully.
A very sexist proverb this morning.
No, it isn't. But it's the truth.
If it was the other way around, you'd have called it a very sexist proverb this morning.
But of course.
I would have said if it was the other way around, I said, well, that is the reality of the day. But the truth of the day is that...
remember, we always say that...
Explain to me how instructing a man instructs an individual and instructing a woman instructs a nation. So explain this proverb.
Before we explain, we usually say, when you educate a woman, you educate a village. If you look at it just practically, who is likely to be a caregiver in the home? It's the woman.
Yeah.
It's the woman who's likely to take care of the husband, the children, relatives, everyone. So if she is knowledgeable, chances are all of these other people will get some knowledge. And we find that households where there's some progress, there's some economic development, you find that their women are strong. They're empowered, they're strong.
And involved.
Yes. Let's look at it. Eric, if when you get a flu, you become a problem to everyone. You cannot even get for yourself a cup of hot water. Somebody has to cater for you.
So
how come?
What does that have to do with instructing a man?
But when a woman is sick, you may not know until at the very last moment when she can no longer handle it anymore.
You can tell when a woman has a headache. Enough said. So, to continue with the numbers.
Good grief. Okay.
COVID-19.
All right. So, let's look at the numbers around us then. Uganda and Rwanda still holding steady. Well, okay, Tanzania too, holding steady at 509 cases for the last 3 weeks. This is a miracle and wonder from
So
heaven.
they're not counting the ones that we're testing for them.
Even if even if they had just counted the ones that came from Kenya, the numbers would have
more
significantly
gone up
by now. But they've decided, you guys count whatever you're counting, we're moving on with that.
But we were told by Rajab yesterday, even those Tanzanians are wondering, how come every time you're testing a Tanzanian at the border, it turns out positive?
But we're testing them here at home,
in
mainland, and there's no problem.
Not even, it's just, how is it possible that all of us are coming here to the border and all of us are getting tested and all of us are turning positive? And then also, if you think about it, I saw in the news yesterday, Kenyan truck drivers are also saying, I've been tested in Kenya. I'm negative. I have the certificate. But I'm fearing if these guys test me,
I'll be positive.
I'll be positive. But I think...
It's the issue of mistrust. But
I would give it the benefit of doubt because, as we said, again, the COVID-19 test is a certificate of good conduct.
Yep.
You're only COVID-free as at now.
Yeah.
And then just because you've tested positive today doesn't mean tomorrow you won't test negative. Because remember, you're shedding the virus. If you had it today, you might be in the process of shedding it, such that by the time we are doing another repeat test, then you're negative. So there are lots of those dynamics at play. So I would give it the benefit of doubt. I do not want to mistrust the science around it because I think, especially for Kenya, we are very serious professionals who have validated these tests and who make sure that we can trust
Yeah.
the results that we get. When they say it's negative, it's negative. When they say it's positive, it is positive.
actually positive.
And you see, now the thing is, the test kits that we have are the same ones that Tanzania has, because all of them were donated by Jack Ma Foundation, the Alibaba Foundation, unless people have exhausted them, 25,000 plus 18,000. So we should be having the same test so far until we exhaust the numbers that we have. So I would give it a benefit of doubt.
Basically, Tanzania has stopped announcing the numbers.
Yeah. I would be surprised if we see any announcement coming out of them this weekend. We didn't see them last weekend. We didn't see them the weekend before.
Yeah.
And I think they're probably going to get to the place whereby they're not going to focus on this at all. They're going to focus on other measures that they put in
We
place.
test you, you fall sick, we treat you, we don't need to tell the whole world.
Yeah.
Finish. Shikina.
And another thing that would be interesting to find out from Tanzania is the relations with the other borders. Zambia, Malawi, who else is in that border? Part of DRC, I think.
8 countries.
How is the relationship at the southern border of Tanzania?
Zambia closed their border, and Tanzania did not even raise a finger about it. Remember? When there were several cases of COVID-19 being reported at the crossing into Zambia, Zambia announced the closure of that border. And Tanzania was okay. It's basically the way you Kenyans are putting it. Oh, so many of these people. Zambia was even saying these people are really cooperating. In fact, we're even talking to the commercial sex workers around this, and they're all cooperating. They're helping us. It's the language.
You can tell somebody something, but it's the manner
Yeah,
in which
it's
you say
how-
it that
it's
makes
how
it-
you tell them.
It's
how you're
you
telling
tell
them.
This is true.
And the rest of you saying there's a lot of COVID in that country.
Well,
Maybe that's how they're feeling. Then you go.
we don't even want.
Yeah. How come Uganda has issues? The same way Uganda is treating Kenyan truck drivers at the border is the same way Uganda is treating Tanzanian truck drivers and at the border.
Right.
Even the ones who are crossing with the ferries and
You may be onto something there, because I think we've seen the sentiment that has come out even from PC Shigella the day before when he said, you know what, Kenyans, no. Burundi, Rwanda,
Malawi,
anybody
Other guys
else,
going,
whoever.
it's okay.
no problem.
Go.
So that was a message that he was trying to pass across. It doesn't mean that it's a human suddenly with 2 heads that comes from Kenya. But yeah, the messaging in which they received it has been taken in a totally different light. And that's how they choose to deal with it. So take it whichever way you want to. They've already passed the message, and this is what they've said. Okay, so if we look at the other numbers, Uganda still holding steady at the numbers that we see. Just a second. I had Uganda is still at 260 and no deaths, and Rwanda is at 380 with no deaths. 308, sorry, with no deaths either. And so we have quite a number of countries. I mean, if you want to look around the world that have not registered any deaths and have low numbers of cases, Central African Republic, for example, 366 cases, no deaths. Rwanda, same thing, no deaths with 308. Uganda, the same thing, or very low deaths. Liberia, 233 with 23 deaths. It's interesting because they have 233 cases with exactly 10% deaths of the cases that they have found. It's still low numbers, but if we want to use that as indicators that the number of people who get this, then high numbers have died as well. So as we look around, the numbers still seem to stay the same. The spikes that we see around the world now, of course, in Central America and in the United States, and a little bit more where we see Spain now jumping up again.
Somalia, by the way, how is Somalia doing?
So Somalia has 1,000. That has increased slightly. Somalia has 1,502 cases with 59 deaths. So looking at another country that we can compare them to, New Zealand has 1,503 cases with 21 deaths. So the same number of cases and almost triple the number of deaths in Somalia that you have in New Zealand. There was a worrying factor because we then saw Kenya close the border with Somalia because there were a number of there's some influx of cases into the country. But it will be interesting to see that they're not reporting daily either. I think their reports come out every 3-4 days or so, and then you're able to add on to what we see there. So more or less the numbers are remaining the same.
Even the Al-Shabaab has reacted to the COVID-19. They came up with a committee comprising experts, medical experts, and terrorism experts to monitor this situation closely.
Yes.
And ensure that, the terrorist organization, Harakat, whatever, Al-Shabaab, can deal with COVID-19.
This is interesting that you say this, because I know that COVID has taken over, but we haven't really seen, of all the tough situations that we saw with war, everybody seems to be on a down low now. And I know that Guterres called for ceasefire while we deal with COVID. It seems that the world has listened to him.
Well, everybody's busy. Unfortunately, for those who are actually victims of these wars, they're also been forgotten.
They have been forgotten.
People in Syria, you can imagine. All the Syrian refugees across borders, what's happening to them? Yeah. Anyway, Guterres, being a former UNHCR boss, should be able to also be thinking, putting that hat on, and focusing his attention on sorting out refugees across the globe. Good morning. 28 minutes to 7 o'clock. Let's take a look at traffic, and then we'll look at the newspaper headlines.
All right, on the roads this morning, let's see what it looks like. Still your normal hotspots on Mombasa Road, a little bit of traffic right around the airport turnoff, getting then to Cabanas, but that'll be not something that you have to contend with for too long. We've already started, guys, an industrial area, Lunga Lunga Road, an accident this morning, a number of vehicles having been written off. Ambulance is already on the scene, so you want to approach with caution. Please be careful. We know that traffic is not as heavy as it normally is. It doesn't give an excuse to go faster than you normally should, guys. You still have to exercise caution and make sure that you arrive alive, because too many people have not in the last couple of days. So I hope this is not going to be the trend for a Wednesday morning. We're through the middle of the week, and let's try to be as careful as possible. We're going to take a look at Thika Road in a bit and see what that looks like. And also around the country, we'll take a look into Mombasa and Kisumu and see what traffic is like this morning. Keep it here, Spice FM KE, in case you see anything that we should know about, let us know, and we'll spread the word. But for now, I can advise you to keep safe, guys. We don't want to get into any sticky situations when we don't have to.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
What do you have, Marcy?
Okay. This one, interesting one. Many women are losing jobs due to COVID. So the headline on the Standard says, many women losing jobs, but more men are dying of COVID. But the men dying of COVID, anyway, we've seen it across the globe where more men are getting infected and men are twice as likely to die of COVID. But now here, where women are paying for COVID is because of their jobs, and we will see why. So this is a story on page 2 of the Standard. It's a worrying trend. New survey by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics on the impact of pandemic on households shows that more than half of the women are out of work, compared to a third of men. 3 in 10 Kenyans cannot pay rent. And this is worrying. Yeah, because now we've seen, and the report by Dominic Omondi says, the huge jump in unemployment among women reflects the kind of jobs that they do, with most of them making a living in occupations that easily buckled under the weight of the pandemic, as government implemented draconian measures aimed at stopping the spread of the disease. And yeah, this, it's, I think, I don't know whether to say it's a sad reality for women. It's a sad reality for all of us, because as we were just saying before with the proverb that, with today's proverb, that women are likely to have many dependents. So when they are out of a job, then the ripple effect is quite significant. Yeah.
I think you also see the fact that, there has been talks of imbalance in employment across the world, whether you want to look at white collar, blue collar, and down, it doesn't really matter, but that women tend to do the jobs. More women are in jobs that would easily then be extinguished in cases like COVID, for example. And if you look at some of the areas in which they're talking about, in the service industry, in restaurants, nanny jobs, salons, casuals, in the manufacturing sector, industry that requires, day hands, you'll find that those are most filled or occupied by women. And in a case where somebody has to be gotten rid of, they tend to then be the collateral damage. Yeah. So I think that's the case. And now when you want to talk about an imbalance, I mean, this doesn't even go to the imbalance in terms of how much you pay, but it just in terms of where women are able to find this work. They're more in the sector where it's easier to get rid of them.
So the report further says that most of their work is labor intensive, as you said. It's customer facing, it's front, you have to be there. So because of this, they can't operate from home. Imagine if you're a barmaid and nanny, and now everyone is working from home, so there's no job for you because the lady of the house is available. If you're a waitress, we have closed, the big hotels closed, sent people home. So you are likely to be, the casualty. You cannot work from home. The salon industry, for example, there are certain things, there's only so much that you're able to do remotely. But you have to be there, your customers have to be there. And with all of these measures, then it's a bit more difficult for women. And so this is the sad reality that we are waking up to this morning.
Let's look at that in detail in the next hour, 7 to 8. Look at the survey, what other aspects of the survey covered, and what this translates to in terms of even how we respond to the COVID-19 pandemic as a country. We'll also be talking to an economist at 8 o'clock to look at the budget. Now that we are preparing the next budget for the next financial year, what is it that this budget should be factoring in, especially now looking at this kind of data from the KNBS and looking at the situation that we have to deal with economically to recover from COVID-19 economically? What should our budget focus on?
And the other question that, looking at this report yesterday and reading this summary has been bothering me is that we did a census a few months ago. We know where everyone is, we know where everyone is working, what they earn, their dependents and whatnot. Couldn't we have foreseen this and done something about it?
It's been foreseen.
I mean, for sure, we can't assume that the powers that be don't know that
it's been foreseen.
This is the situation. And they're already aware.
The doing something bit is just like everything else.
Which is unfortunate, because I'm thinking if I were a manager and I know this is coming, I know these are the industries that are likely to suffer, these are the people that are likely to suffer. This thing that they're saying, oh, we have unveiled a cash transfer program, all of those rosy words, should have been done way before. The same thing as we're talking about social protection. You already know who your people are.
Yep.
You don't even need people to have a bank account. Everyone has a phone and they have an M-Pesa access. Really. Couldn't we have done something about it so that we don't see these numbers? Because if and we look at the statistics, it is not just the 50% of women who are jobless. There are more people who are now affected because 50% are out of jobs. And also not just to belittle the 30% of men who are also out of jobs.
Yeah.
Because now that means there's a whole section of our population that may not recover from COVID.
Yep.
Right.
When you find so many people who are unable to pay rent, then it also tells you something. 30% unable to pay rent, it's a huge number. It tells you something. It tells you even the landlords don't have a source of income as well. There's a lot. Anyway, let's look at that in detail in the next hour. The headline on the Standard, Raila not signing Uhuru power deal. Not surprising at all. Catch-22, it's a legal dilemma that prevents ODM from entering a coalition agreement with Jubilee, and Raila is not keen on a formal pact that co-opts him in government to avoid the backlash of incumbency should he vie for the presidency in 2022. This is quoting ODM chairman John Mbadi, who's also the leader of the minority in the National Assembly. We are not entering into a coalition now. What we are focused on is continuing with the cooperation that we have with the president through the handshake. We have agreed in principle to use the existing cooperation to support the development agenda. Well, it's clear the legal dilemma. ODM is in a pre-election coalition with other political parties and they formed the NASA coalition. So unless the entire NASA coalition comes and agrees now to form a post-election agreement, I think that's where the conundrum is and on what to do, how should they handle it. But they're cooperating anyway. You don't need to sign things. Although it would be good to sign them so that you're tied down and do well. Yes.
But I don't know. I tend to agree with the decision by ODM because that backlash of it's not that their image is any better, but when you formalize things, then now we have something to hold you accountable for. But now when it was just a handshake at the steps of Harambee House and it's quiet, you're working together, later if you come and say, oh, A, B, C, and D, all manner of stories, why that one was just PR and whatnot, we'll believe. Okay, we are likely to believe. But when you've put something down on pen and paper, then we're like, but you read. It's the same thing you're asking Sonko. You can't come now and say you didn't understand what you're signing. You signed it. So I think it looks like a good move. And then because you also don't want to be tied to the failures, if any, and maybe there are many, of the incumbent. When the time comes.
You'll be government. But either way, I think to the public eye, when it comes to the election, you've been cooperating with the government. So there's absolutely no other way. There's no way we are looking at Raila now and not seeing him as a core principle in the government.
I mean, sure. And I think just from perception or even mere speculation, it would be that if you did join forces with the government, as it were, it would just be for formality because everybody just believes that you've been with them all along anyway. So this would just be a formality, cementing what you've already been doing. Right?
It's just taking that legal step of, for you to enter into this coalition, first of all, you must break the pre-election coalition. So you must formally pull out of NASA, following the procedure of pulling out of NASA. When they were coming together, they must have made it very clear that you cannot just get out just like that.
Yeah.
So the process of getting out of the NASA coalition is not easy. And especially when you hear the ANC leader saying, us guys are still in NASA. That means...
And we are happy in there.
We are happy in there. Could also mean that maybe their coalition agreement said all of us must agree to break. Right. If all of us don't agree to break up, then nobody leaves. That's a conundrum right there.
All right. Okay. Something totally different now. Victims of the 1998 Nairobi bombing set to be compensated. a U.S. court rules that Sudan should pay about $1 trillion shillings to the affected parties. More than 30 Kenyans will benefit from billions of shillings as payment for the punitive damages to some victims of the 1998 attacks on the U.S. embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, in a case that will have far-reaching implications for Sudan and perhaps other countries said to be sponsoring terrorism. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled Monday that Sudan should pay about 1 trillion shillings in punitive damages to more victims of the 1998 terror attacks. Victims and their families following the attacks sued the Republic of Sudan in the U.S., alleging that it had assisted al-Qaeda to perpetrate the attacks. So then, after more than 10 years, the plaintiffs proved Sudan's role in the attacks and established their entitlement to compensation. Sudan did appeal and argued that the court, on appeal, however, Sudan argued and the court agreed that the U.S. Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act barred the punitive damages award. So the victims and their families moved to the Supreme Court. The matter was argued in February and a ruling made on the 18th. In the lawsuit, the plaintiffs sued Sudan for personal injury or death caused by acts of terrorism and some punitive damages. So, a Washington-based attorney representing 567 plaintiffs interpreted Monday's ruling as a victory. And this means that now Sudan will have to pay this money.
The catch here is who is to receive the money.
It's saying more than 30 Kenyans. Now, these 30 Kenyans, we don't know who
These
exactly
are the people
they
who
are.
worked for the embassy.
They were Foreign Service nationals working at the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi, and they will benefit. There's a list of their names here. I'm not going to go into all of their names right now, but those who worked in the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi at that time, those are the ones who are going to benefit from this. So it's not just anybody who was maybe would have been in the building. These are specific individuals who worked for the United States.
Yep. And the other people who died. Remember, this bombing killed more than 200 people.
It did.
And if you're talking about compensation going to only 30, then there's something that you're saying.
I mean, here we go. But this is for a reason, for example, why this case was heard out in the U.S. It is because of the fact that these individuals who took the case to court took it under the auspices of the United States by virtue of the fact that this attack happened while they were employees of the U.S. government.
Now, it's upon the Court of Appeal to determine whether some of the other victims can also get compensation. And that, I think that we need to get a lot of clarity in this in the days to come on what happens to everybody else.
But
so if we talk about just those 30,
cases.
Is it those 30? Is it their families? Is it the 30 who died? What is it? Is it people who died? Because it also goes further to mention things like, their families of the victims do not get compensation. Those that got injured and were not employees of the U.S. Embassy at the time do not get compensation. So,
I mean, this particular case though was for
Kenyans.
This particular case though was for these 30 was for these specific individuals who worked. Like I said, there are many other cases that are going on as we speak, are still waiting for some kind of judgment or allowing the legal process to continue. So this particular case is for those individuals who worked in the U.S. Embassy. There are others who worked in the building. There are others who worked in different offices who also have taken cases to court.
And anyway, you get a ruling or judgment according to what you or the people have brought forward. So if two of us have made a case, if you are not enjoined in it, then when damages come, obviously, there's no way you can come and ask for a slice of the cake.
So then the other bit is, how does Sudan pay?
Actually, that's the bigger question. Will it even pay?
How do you get Sudan to pay? I'm saying it says Sudan risks losing its assets in the U.S. So some of the assets could be attached. Along another convoluted process as well. 10 minutes to 7 o'clock. Let's take a short break. This conversation continues.
online, mobile, and on radio. Instagram at Spice FM KE.
Headlines. What do you have, Dr. Marcy? That's interesting.
So this, okay, I think today I'm just a purveyor of bad news. This is tucked on page 18 of the Standard. The agony of cancer patients as caregivers stay away. There are 553 patients in need of palliative care at Nakuru Hospice. This is a story by Mercy Kahenda, the Standard's reporter in Nakuru. Morphine, a painkiller for cancer patients, is out of stock in most hospitals, while visits to doctors is now limited. Remember, cancer patients or people with terminal illnesses are some of the vulnerable groups to COVID-19. These are people whom you do not want exposed to COVID-19, because if they do get the virus, then chances of them suffering severe or critical disease is higher, and chances of death is higher. So these are stories of people who are literally living in pain. One person whose photo is there died on April 3 because they couldn't access palliative care, because some of these illnesses, you just need your pain taken care of, nutrition taken care of, oxygen if you need. But now, because of the fear of contracting the disease in hospitals, few are going to hospitals. While before you could get people coming to visit you, come and see you and check on you, now people are not doing that. So it's a story of just, lonely existence. And there's one quote here that for me is very sad. This is Miss Gitonga, Mary Gitonga. She's 57 years old, who lives in Nakuru. She has breast cancer and needs palliative care and regular medical checkup. So she says, I'm not sure if I'm alive or I dream about life. This life seems too lonely, and I just wait for God. I will accept his will. That is the point where they are. Now, you cannot access pain medication. Like her, she's just living on Betapin while she could use morphine. Now, the reason why we don't have morphine is because KEMSA, Kenya Medical Supplies Agency, has received only 11 kilograms of morphine powder, which is now constituted and can be distributed around the country, on February 19. Yet, the average annual consumption is 50 kilograms of morphine powder. It sounds little, but when you reconstitute it, because you really need some small doses, then it will be enough for everyone. So it's mixed problems for people with terminal illnesses, and in this case, cancer. Yeah.
It's important, I think, that at some point the Ministry of Health, as soon as possible, gives us the status of everybody who was seeking medical treatment before COVID.
True.
BC, because like we were talking to Abdi Mohammed the other day and telling us that it's true indeed that what we are seeing, the number of people seeking medical care, either outpatient or inpatient, has drastically dropped in public, private and mission hospitals. What does that mean? People are still sick. People who are going to hospital are still sick. People like now, these ones who have terminal illnesses,
They're keeping
what's
away.
happening to them?
They're staying at home, and we're seeing like one died because they were only able to seek help when it was really, really bad, and it was at the later stages.
And then now that you're telling us it has been taking 3 years to come up with that national cancer, what was it? That data center, information center,
cancer registry.
the cancer registry.
Yeah.
All right.
Nairobi cancer.
So far, we at least have some data on
Yes.
who is undergoing cancer treatment countrywide.
We do.
It should be possible for the government to be following up on them and saying, all right, so these people, these are critically ill patients. They require attention, regardless of cancer. Of COVID. Irregardless is national language. Irregardless of COVID. So you've got to have the government doing something and telling us, as actually the Ministry of Health should be telling us, this is what we're doing.
They know, because if you look at the example given in this story, it's at Nakuru Hospice. They know they have 553 patients in need of palliative care.
553.
Yeah, so you know them. You even know where they are. I mean, if a reporter could trace somebody at her home in Kiagororia in Nakuru, really, the hospice knows where these people are.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of actually doing something to make sure that your most vulnerable, and in this case, cancer patients, are well taken care of. And palliative care here, you're not necessarily looking to
we're talking about somebody who's in pain.
They're in pain, they need of food, they need of psychosocial support. It's holistic.
It's all
basically what palliative care does is to add quality, add life. We usually say add life to your days, not days to your life. So we want to make sure that you are comfortable, you're out of pain, you're eating well, you have people around you, you have people you can converse with, you have counseling if you need to. All of those things, just making sure that you are as comfortable as possible. That's palliative care. We are not looking to cure. We are not looking at, any of the definitive treatment. Quality of life is what we are looking for. So when you're at that point, if it's morphine that you need 50 kilograms of morphine, you want to tell me a whole country cannot afford 50 kilograms of morphine for all our terminally ill cancer patients or other people who are in need of cancer treatment.
Even if they don't have, they didn't have money now, right? They can allocate this from budget.
Exactly.
We can even say that part of what we are dealing with now in terms of dealing with COVID-19 is ensuring that these people who are most vulnerable are also being taken care of. It can easily go into a COVID budget.
It still goes back towards issues of preparedness and just a general understanding of what is needed across board. Because you can't tell me that, just as an example, the 11 kgs of morphine that's currently available in the country, knowing very well that we need 50. So what was the preparation that was put in place to have all of these things taken into consideration? By the details of the definition that you've given of what palliative care is, that means those who are involved in palliative care understand what that means. And know for a fact that regardless of what people are going through, know what people are going through. So I'm sorry, not sorry. Regardless of what people are going through, you know that they need this care. Whether war, pestilence, famine, they need this care, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of the preparedness for it, should have been prepared for it anyway. So whether there is COVID or not, these things should have been put in place.
Should have been in
so
place.
that these individuals are being taken care of.
Right.
See, and it's all about preparedness, if you ask me.
Coming to the top of the hour, and we'll carry on with this conversation a bit as we go into the next hour. It's coming up to 7 o'clock. Today's proverb is from Morocco, but it's in every community, I believe, in Africa. It says, instruct a man and you instruct an individual. Instruct a woman, you instruct a nation.
These Moroccans know what they're talking about.
They do. Good morning, 7 o'clock.
So we want to see what traffic looks like around different parts of the country. Let's start off in Mombasa, where it's not too bad. Then coming into the town of Mombasa, a little bit of traffic this morning. Then getting right into the CBD, right around Moy Avenue, right there at Tusks. It's not so bad. Getting in and about. Not many people are traveling within the city of Mombasa this morning. All right, let's go west. And in Nakuru this morning, downtown Nakuru, a little bit of traffic, then getting in and out of the city, but it is not so bad either. Then using the main highway coming in from Naivasha and then out then towards is a little bit of a hold up, but it is looking all right. Looking at Kisumu, then out towards the airport on Obote, out towards leaving the city is where we see a little bit of a hold up this morning, but then getting within the city center is actually looking like a ghost town from what we see. And that will give us not too terrible levels of traffic this morning. So that's what we'll look at for now, and then come back and look at what Nairobi looks like around about 7:30. But for now, in other parts of the country, it is looking good. Spice FM KE, if you do see something we should know about, don't hesitate to let us know.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic,
Coming up to
seasoned
three
political observer,
minutes
a
after 7. Good
fountain
morning.
of wisdom in
How are
these
you?
politically
Thank you very much
uncertain
for tuning in
times.
to Spice FM. This
Oko,
is The Situation
Nigerian
Room.
by
In the room
birth,
this morning is
Kenyan
Eric
by
Martin,
choice,
Ndiko
communications
Dr.
expert,
Mercy for you.
Pan-Africanist,
He's our guest
a
host for
truth
the
seeker
season.
and
As we're going
believer
into the
in
break,
people
we're
power,
looking at the story on
and
page 18 of
Eric
the Standard this
Latin,
morning. Agony
agent
for cancer
provocateur,
patients
the
as
man in the chair,
caregivers.
seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up,
such
not
illnesses require.
Yeah.
And that they are not getting now. They were getting this in January, February, BC, and now they're not.
And even in that January, February before coronavirus, officially, it's not that it was ideal
Adequate.
or adequate or optimum. There are still challenges. But now, as we've kept on saying, with the coronavirus, we've been able to see our weaknesses and our best. And here is one of those weaknesses where now we are unable to take care of our most vulnerable. I mean, as Ndu was saying, it's just about preparedness. If you know you have so many cancer patients in the country knows that we lose, unfortunately, about 33,000 cancer patients in a year. How do you make their lives much better? How do you make sure that in this time, even though you're not doing anything definitive for these people, that you give them quality? Because now families are scared because they've had to watch their kin die in pain. That is not a good situation to be in.
At all.
It's traumatizing. And in this case, they're with you in the house. So it means you become the healthcare provider, you become the caregiver, you become the counselor, you become everything for this particular person, and then you lose them. And then on top of that, and this was in yesterday's the Standard, you're not able to mourn your loved ones because you have 48 hours in which to inter, and within those 48 hours you're being harassed left, right, and center. You can only have so many family members, and so there is a lot that is happening in a bad situation that is making it worse. And I don't know, we could make things better. And I see here Dr. Nafula Wekesa, palliative care specialist, saying maybe families for dying patients, families can record audio or make calls that can be played at hospital for the sick. Because remember, hospitals have also limited visits.
The visits.
Yeah, because the social interaction, the social connection is still necessary. So if you can record an audio, a video, something that your loved one can see, then maybe it will make them feel like they're not alone after all. So there's a lot here that hasn't been looked at from end to end to take care of.
You know, we're talking about 2 months. 2 months for somebody who was already undergoing dialysis, who was going for chemotherapy,
radiotherapy,
and radio. All these people,
checkups,
they basically were making that trip to the hospital with their caregivers. They are staying with their caregivers. Their caregivers coming to visit them at home. This is something that is big. Because even now, if you think KNH was serving very many people who were coming just for renal, just for dialysis from across the country. Now people cannot travel into Nairobi to access KNH. You must prove that you're really going to KNH. It is so, it's become cumbersome.
I remember at the beginning of the restricted movement into the Nairobi metropolitan services, a doctor friend of mine called me. Their patients had been assaulted as they were leaving. They were leaving the Nairobi metropolitan area. They were from Murang'a. So they'd come in for radiotherapy.
Yep.
So I think when the police officers, the security officers change shifts, then new people come in. So they came in comfortably with all their paperwork. And on going back, nobody wanted to hear anything about
the first thing is turn back.
Yeah. And then so
tumetoka nimesema urudi.
This is somebody with stage 3 cancer.
Yep.
You've made them alight at at 6 p.m. out in the cold, they've already they're coming from a traumatizing situation. First of all, you have cancer, you're going through radio. It's a really difficult time with their family, and you're like, no, we don't want to go back to where you've come from. They don't even live in Nairobi, so where do you expect them to go to?
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of issues that have made life more difficult for people with terminal illnesses.
The government calls them teething problems, but these are pulling teeth problems. You know, these
yeah.
are painful. I witnessed it myself. The time when I went to the Blue Post barrier, right? So there's this old man who came and he was telling the police officers, I've come from Kandara, I boarded a boda, and I could not even, the boda guy could not even come close to this barrier. So I've walked a couple of kilometers to get here. And I'd like you to allow me just to go to the other side. And the police officer was like, it's okay. If you're going to hospital, you just pass. Then the man was like, now, is it possible for you to get me a vehicle? Just a lift so that I can get to Thika and take the next transport. Now, the senior police officer was actually, very good and kind. And he said, okay, just wait here. Let me see how I can sort you out. Got him some help and transport to cross. And he told him, just go to KNH. It's okay. Ukimaliza, urudi tutaenda nyumbani. But you could see this man, he says he's alone. He's going for dialysis at KNH. He's come from Kandara, a couple of kilometers from this barrier. Boarded a boda guy told him, I'm not going close to those police officers. I'm leaving you here, you walk. So walks all the way to the barrier. And before he came to this senior cop, he had tried talking to these other junior cops. Mzee toka bwana unatusumbua mzee. He noticed now the senior guy, and he came, tafadhali, naweza kuongelesha. And I was standing there now interviewing the senior cop. And this is when the man was like, okay, let me hear what you're saying. And just by luck that the senior cop was in a mood to listen. He had not just come out of dealing with somebody who's being kichwangumu. He listened and helped this man. Imagine what he was going through. Now he arrives in Nairobi. He still has to find his way to KNH, his way out of KNH, going back to Kandara, same day. Already, it's past midday. He is still at the roadblock trying to go for his dialysis appointment.
Which takes at least 4 hours. Yeah. At least 4 hours.
And you will not just go in and umefika, haya, kuja, connect. No. You'll sit there for a bit, waiting for a machine to be available.
I think these eruptions that we see you want to call them small eruptions that we see every now and then, are just still indicative of the fact that there's so many things that have not been taken into consideration. And I mean, it sounds like a broken record, but still, if you look at the planning phase of it, by the time you're saying, let's have a cessation of movement, for example, within certain counties, the ideal situation, and you're going to have to allow us to exist there for a minute, is that you would have taken all of these other things into consideration. Now, we would say it's difficult for us to do that because we don't have this, that, or the other thing.
We don't know.
Now, imagine if you had a system in place, which is how it should run. If you had a system in place where data was informing your decisions, whereby your planning and deliberate focus was then making sure that certain things were able to be done, when you then call for certain things to mitigate a pandemic, for example, it makes it easy because you already have these things in place. So when somebody is asking you to have them in place, it doesn't mean that you do it for purposes of emergency. It means that you do it because that is how you should be living anyway. So that in case something does happen, then you don't have to turn yourself upside down to make sure people are taken care of. A couple of weeks ago, we had the discussion about special needs children and how they are having a difficult time now when schools are closed. They need special care anyway, right? There's certain things that need to be done for them regardless of the situation. Same thing for those who are in palliative care. Same thing for people who, by nature of their medical history, they need some kind of emergency care every now and then. An emergency, by definition, doesn't allow you time to prepare, right? So these are many things that I really feel should be taken into consideration. And I hope, it is my prayer to God, and I hope it goes from my mouth to heaven's ears, and that you can now be manifested in the minds of people who sit in the position to make these changes, that there are certain things that need to be done. And we don't have to wait for things to turn on their head before we now start trying to backtrack and see what we can do. We would make it so much easier. And we say, look at the countries that have set in measures to get things done and they roll out their lockdown. It's not because they have money. It's not about the money in this case. It's about proper planning.
Yeah.
It's about making sure that they have all their ducks in a row. They've dotted their I's. They've crossed their T's every day as a normal practice, so that when the abnormal happens, you can deal with it in a normal way.
Even if we say that, well, for whatever reason, there was no proper planning ahead of this, right? You should also be quick to adapt.
To adjust.
Yeah.
When you
Yes.
get the information, because this is a health pandemic, it's being spearheaded by the health ministry. The issues we are discussing are under health.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you'll get information from your own doctors, from your own facilities telling you, oh, okay, so we had this number of patients and we don't know what to do with them. This information must be coming all the way up to the war room at Afia House. And they should be able to listen and say, all right, so this is what we are going to do to address this particular vulnerable group. Let's assume that by the time they were deciding, let's ask the president to order cessation of movement and all that, they hadn't factored in all these things. But after receiving feedback more than 60 days later, by now, they should have done something. We should be hearing how they're extending palliative care support to all these patients. They are extending access to hospital facilities to these people who need to go. They must go to hospital. And yet we have said, reduce the number of vehicles, reduce the number of hours, do not cross into or out of some of these counties. So what happens to these people? This is a matter that should, it should have come to them by now. And they should have addressed it by now.
No, I think I'm about having gone to them. That one went to them a long time ago.
As soon as.
Yes, because I remember I specifically asked the Ministry of Health in one of the press conferences about people in need of continued healthcare getting access into the Nairobi metropolitan services, because it is the fault of government that these services are not as devolved as you would want, because most cancer services, you'll get them within the big cities, Nairobi, Mombasa. If you have a story here about a gentleman, Jonathan, in Narok, who needs to come to Nairobi. I mean, if there was an alternative, he could have gone to Kisii, could have gone to Kisumu, Kericho, Eldoret, other places. But now he has been coming to Nairobi. Now he's unable to come. So the Ministry of Health, the acting director general, said, anyone who needs to still continue getting services should send an email to his office or get a letter from his office to facilitate movement in and out. But then there was a situation where when people had letters from even Kenyatta or documents, medical documents from the hospital saying this person is undergoing care, this person has actually come here for radiotherapy and whatnot. At the security point, nobody cares to listen. Then it becomes very difficult to, to coordinate everything. You're saying one thing, but what is happening
I can imagine when Dr. Amoth was saying, get a letter from my office, he didn't actually mean his office in Afia House. He meant his office and everything that represents the Director General of Health across the country. So it should have been clear. You can go, either you can go to the doctor
Even
there
your
and
county.
your county. So your county, the senior doctor signs and stamps something, and then you can use that to access the health facility. But even going beyond that, you're telling somebody who is at stage 4 of cancer, go to doctor, get this stamped, go from there, go.
You've made it more difficult.
You're basically
for them.
Introducing a barrier to access the health services. It doesn't make sense to me.
And you find these people who have chronic illnesses, they have tons and tons of documents anyway. So for me, it doesn't really make sense
to get another one.
To get another letter that is stamped that you can access Nairobi, because these people have files and files. If you have seen anyone on dialysis, anyone with cancer treatment, anyone with a chronic illness, even HIV, they have bucket loads of files and documents, and they keep them. They can carry them. They even have medicines with them throughout. Yeah. So that, for me, should be enough to say, as long as you can prove that the name written on the medical reports and the ID you're showing to the police is one and the same person, people should get access to healthcare services. The other one is not just being able to convince the security officers or get through barriers, but actually moving. As you said, the gentleman from Kandara walked.
Yeah.
So already you're suffering from a chronic illness, you have to walk. They should have made it easier
You are weak.
for inter-county transfer.
Yep.
Provide ambulance services, because these are people with pre-existing conditions. Do you want them in matatus? Do you want them in public
You want
transport?
them to enter into public transport and start moving to go to hospital to seek care.
Yes, and you can hardly afford to hire your own vehicle also. So life should have been made easy for this group of people, and they're not many. And the government knows them.
This conversation continues 17 minutes after 7. Let's take a look at weather, and then we can also open up the phone lines to hear what your experience is. I mean, these people are our relatives. They are us. We have them in the community. What is it? What kind of difficulty are we going through accessing medical services and health services for people with chronic illnesses, people who are going to hospital in the months and weeks BC before COVID? What's happening? 0719 012 600. This is a Situation Room, 18 minutes after 7.
Is peaking out in some parts. 24 degrees the high and lows of 16. We'll have showers in the afternoon. Looking into Nyeri now at 16 degrees. Chances of a wet afternoon with highs of 23 and lows of 16. Nakuru is mostly sunny at 14 degrees. The rain expected later with highs of 24. Looking into Eldoret at 13 degrees. Mostly cloudy conditions throughout today with highs of 23 and lows of 12. 18 degrees in Kisumu and partly cloudy. Highs of 28 with rain showers expected in the afternoon. Mostly cloudy conditions in Mombasa this morning at 24 degrees. Highs of 27 and lows of 23. Chances of a wet afternoon in Mombasa. Malindi will follow suit with a wet afternoon at highs of 24 and lows of highs of 28 and lows of 24. It's mostly cloudy currently at 25 degrees. Kampala at 19 degrees is partly cloudy this morning. There's also chances of rain quite high with highs of 26 and lows of 19. Dar es Salaam is mostly cloudy at 23 degrees with highs of 27. We will see some thunderstorms in the afternoon with highs of 27. Johannesburg at 8 degrees is clear skies and sunny conditions all through with highs of 21 and lows of 7. For now, we'll stop it with Lagos at 26 degrees and clear skies this morning, partly cloudy conditions later, then with highs of 32 and lows of 27.
Sugar and spice and everything nice.
20 after 7. This is a Situation, Kenya's biggest conversation. We are live streaming on www.spicefm.co.ke as well as our social media handles, SpiceFMKE, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, discussing the agony of patients with, what do you call them? Terminal illnesses?
Terminal illness, yeah.
Yep, who require continuous care in our health facilities. And now in this era of COVID-19, we have a cessation of movement, we've got reduction of transport. We don't actually want these people to mix in public transport because they are highly exposed. They are highly vulnerable. Exposing them in public transport is basically just being careless of us. Somebody is tweeting in and saying, we have a huge capacity problem. And it starts from a thinking capacity.
I tend to agree with that. Because a lot of these things for me can be solved in the mind, first of all, before you even have to touch anything. It's just in your mind. And then, you know, the people who said two heads are better than one, like minds come together, they knew what they were talking about. And to be able to plan something out is people sitting down of the same profession, same area of expertise, same who work in the same place to be able to say, this is actually what we need. This is what needs to be done. And then, the painful thing on top of all of this palliative care that individuals are looking for, they're paying for it. It's not free.
It's not free.
It comes out of their pocket. In addition to the physical pain and mental torture that they have to go through as well, they have to pay for it. So all we're saying is that make the environment conducive enough so that come hell or high water, they're still able to access this care that they need. And it then goes to show that it shows very well what the state of affairs really is. Because if you want to remove COVID from the equation, then you know what really happens. You know what really happens around is that the care is not adequate. It's not complete. It's not all round. People are still having to suffer. I mean, this gentleman who is in Kandara, that's where he lives. He still has to come to Nairobi for healthcare, this kind of care. So again, goes to show and ask the question, why is it that palliative care, for example, or why is it that kidney dialysis is only available in Nairobi?
Why is it not available?
Why is it not available in
Close to-
Kandara?
yeah.
In Kandara,
Murang'a.
close to him.
Closer to him. We have to ask those questions and say then, why is it that a health system which is devolved not just in the way you'll manage it, but also should then be shared across the country, because people don't only live in Nairobi, for crying out loud. People live across the country and are also inundated by these health issues.
Yep.
So why not have the care available across the country? Those are the questions that we should be asking and saying something needs to be done about this. The health of the people is important, because who will you lead and govern if they're all sick or dead?
Nobody. And the irony for me here on the same pages is that on one side, you have agony for cancer patients as caregivers stay away. And on the other side, health volunteers to miss out on safety kits, because community health volunteers have lost the fight for 1.2 billion kits to protect them against the coronavirus. Now, this kit has soap, surgical scissors, razor blades, Dettol soap, Savlon, Jig Savlon, gloves, aspirin, antimalarial tabs, albendazole, that's dewormer, multivitamins, Piriton, iron tabs, paracetamol, water guard, gallipots, medical envelopes, waste disposal bags, tissue paper, pens, notebooks, flip charts.
So they were
Now,
getting this kit.
They had requested for these kits, and it would have cost 1.2 billion for the community health volunteers in the country. So this group of people who I'm particularly interested and very keen on community health volunteers are the people, if they have those kits, are able to go and visit some of these people in their homes. If you need a wound cleaned, they would clean it for you. If you need any medication, they would be able to attend to you. If they need to escalate your issue, they are able to, because they are linked to a certain healthcare facility or medical personnel. And if you look at some of the things there, really, this is an important kit for basic things that then would facilitate them to be able to do something for people. Then, instead of somebody staying with a wound at home that they are unable to get cleaned or treated for whatever reason, because they cannot access healthcare facilities or they're in fear of getting into a matatu, somebody would come
Their
to
neighbor.
you and take care of you while
Their
there.
neighbor, who's a trained community health volunteer, would come to them and sort them out. So basically, this looks like it's one of those things that we call collateral damage, reallocation of budgets and priorities. Now we are fighting COVID. We had planned to buy these things on your behalf. Now, because of COVID, we don't even have this 1.5 billion shillings. The little money that we have, we are throwing it down this hole called COVID.
Because you've seen there, Dr. Masi Mwangangi saying that COVID-19 pandemic struck when the government was about to purchase the kits for the volunteers who play a critical role in primary health care by bridging the health workforce gaps.
How soon before this were they supposed to buy those kits? I think that would be very interesting to note.
For me, it's
It
not
was
even
in
how
this.
soon.
It was in this financial year.
So they've
So
said
they
it
were
will
going
go
to-
to the next financial
Yeah.
year. But you see, for me, the point is, these people, you've very well said, they play a critical role in primary health care.
Yep.
The things we're talking about here are not your fancy surgeries and whatnot. They are basic things.
Which was my next
Wouldn't
question.
the priority be to kit these people so that we do not talk about some of the stories that we are talking about here.
Maybe you can
Ziba
enlighten
Ufa.
us in this case, because then that was my next question to be able to ask and say then, are we talking about something that is so complicated
No.
that is difficult to get or difficult to plan around? And somebody may say, all right, well, you're not in that field, so you wouldn't understand how difficult
Here's
this
the
thing
issue.
is. So please help us understand.
Here's the issue.
What exactly are we talking
We have
about
trained
here?
volunteer people who volunteered in various villages. We brought them together, we've trained them. Now, after training them, we are assisting counties in purchasing these kits so that that training then can be put to use. Otherwise, we trained them and then we told them, now you can do this with wounds. They don't have the tools. So to equip them, we've put it in the budget and we've said, as the national government, we're going to purchase and then distribute through the counties to the community health volunteers. COVID comes, right? Lands at JKIA, enters Kenya. And then now we have taken all our money to dealing with these other things called COVID. Buying gloves, sanitizers, whatever
But they
things that we're
donated
doing.
it, you know.
Yeah, all those things that we're doing. Now, Dr. Mwangangi is telling Senate, we had planned to do this. We can no longer do this in this financial year. It has to wait until the next financial year. Do you know the process it takes
To
from
get
the moment
something
Okuri
approved.
Yatani reads his budget to the moment this money is released, to the moment procurement happens and the kit is put together and it's distributed and taken to counties and down to the community health volunteer, your neighbor? We're talking about, if it hadn't happened up to now, and we are in May, coming to the end of the financial year, we're talking about May next year.
And here,
This is it.
so this is where I wanted to disagree with the person who says we don't have thinking capacity. We do. The problem comes with the implementation, because in this community, the health volunteers
If you don't think how you're going to implement it,
no, it's already there, because they even have a formula where one community unit was to cater for a population of 5,000 in an area manned by 10 community health volunteers, and each of the 10 would get a kit. So 10 of you have a population of 5,000, and in that population of 5,000, not everyone is sick or not everyone needs constant care.
Yeah.
So the formula is there. It's just that now we do not have money to give you soap, gloves, multivitamins, waste disposal bags,
we cannot
tissue
equip
paper.
you to do the work that you're supposed to do.
And
Right.
and here we are talking about, we want to achieve UHC.
Yes.
We want to provide primary health care. If you have not addressed the basics on the ground,
We are very good, Dr. Mercy, and we keep saying this, we are very good at doing things on paper. In this country, tell someone, give me a plan. Nduoka will sit here for 1 hour and she'll give you a very good plan. This
it's
one,
already
I'll
there.
put it on paper. Very good.
Done.
We have protocols for everything. There was training protocol. There was rollout protocol. There was, this is how we are going to support the community health volunteers protocol.
It's
This is
here.
how we are going to get the feedback protocol. All of that. It's going to be budgeted. It's even put in the budget.
it's
And
even
then
there.
we have not
We even know
factored
the
in
cost.
what do we need to do in the event. Okay, so here we are. 1.2 billion shillings. This needs to go back into some writing of protocol that says, you know what, it doesn't matter what other health emergency you're dealing with. If you do not deal with primary health care, you are going to have a cycle of health emergencies.
And
It will go
looking
into
at
another protocol.
looking at what this would do, if you have this 10 community health volunteers manning a population of 5,000, we're looking at the COVID pandemic. They are likely to identify somebody who is sick, somebody who has come in contact with COVID-19, somebody who's showing symptoms. They're likely to pick them out faster.
Especially now that people are not going to hospital.
Exactly. But now we do not have 1.2 billion because we have other priorities, which is UHC. So what is this UHC thing? What is it if you're not being able to take care of the most basic? Yesterday we talked
I
to...
think UHC, even talking to the 4 counties that have rolled it out, when you spoke to the Nyeri deputy governor, who was very, very much involved in the rollout of the UHC pilot in Nyeri, he's telling us the most basic thing for UHC is these people,
Yes.
the community health volunteers.
Yeah.
That's where it starts. You get that right and you get your UHC right. So here we are.
And remember yesterday when we were talking to Dr. Jackson Kioko, the CEO KHPO, your first basic unit of healthcare is the community. And their role is just two. And one of them is to know when to refer, what to do, and do these basic things.
Yeah.
You don't need to travel from Thika to Kenyatta to get your wounds cleaned if somebody can come and do that for you. You don't need to.
And they've been trained. We're
They're
not talking about a quack. We are talking about somebody who's been trained through government. Trained, this is what you shall do. This is how you shall identify illness. This is, it's all about case identification or case management.
Identification.
Those ones. They have the basics.
They're the basics.
Certainly
And it's not just government can employ, but we also have other what they call non-state agents.
Yes.
Actors,
And non-state actors.
And all of those people. We have AMREF there who have a network of community health volunteers.
Yeah.
So what is the problem? Because it is, I'm sorry,
Money.
it is not, no, it's not money.
I also refuse. It's not
It's
money.
not money. Money is not the problem, because you can't say the reason why we've not put all these things in place is because we're waiting for money. So was somebody at some point waiting? We figured it out now here in 3 minutes that somebody who has been trained to dress a wound cannot be placed in a dispensary to be able to do that, and somebody has to travel from one county to another to have something as basic as wound dressing done. Right? Or you walk into a dispensary and they don't have running water, something that is vital for the application of healthcare. Or you walk into somewhere else and they don't have drugs, and they tell you, actually, we don't have, but there's a chemist down the road who just happens to be the chemist of the doctor who is here on duty. I mean, come on. It's not money. There's so many things that are going on here that are just wrong. And there's a reason why
So you
health.
agree with James' thinking capacity?
No, I think a capacity to think is there.
Starts from there.
It starts from the capacity to think is there. If you have a brain, then you have capacity for thinking. It's just now how you're able to put it together and then implement thereafter. You just told us about the wonderful documents that you see that people put together. That means that somebody somewhere is engaging their brain. Now, somewhere along the line, between the engagement of the brain and then the implementation of this thing that the brain churns out, that's where the problem is.
Do a wusa.
And the willingness to actually having, I can't. We do
Do
a
what?
wusa things going through the window.
Do a wusa.
I can't.
Then look at the roads.
No.
Okay, just do that, because we don't need you doing traffic in that state of mind. Relax.
Constant state
Are you
of
okay?
mind, my dear.
Are you okay? 27 minutes to 8. We do a clock for 12 seconds.
Upset. She is thoroughly
And then she tells us how the roads are looking this morning.
Okay. I don't even know what to say. Okay, Mombasa Road looks a little thick right now, right? But okay, so it goes to the SGR Gateway Mall to the airport turnoff and then to Cabanas General Motors. That stretch there seems to have a little bit of a hold up, but I know that's going to open up. Everybody coming in from the eastern, southern bypasses joining in one place, but you'll be fine after that. Jogo Road was moving quite slowly this morning, getting to the City Stadium roundabout and then out into the CBD, but you'll be all right. It's not too bad. Gong Road today seems to have a bit of an issue right about now. We know that certain parts of Gong Road have been completed, but the other parts are still being worked on. For some reason, there's a hold up right around there. Hopefully that'll be sorted out soon. Coming off Thika Road into the CBD also, we had a bit of an issue, but it'll open up. Not so bad right now. Spice of MKE, that's how you can reach us. Let us know what it is that you see.
There are government agencies that really do their work, right? Those who are supposed to plan, they do the planning. Those who are supposed to collect data, they do collection of data. We'll be looking at the report that was released yesterday by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, which is showing us the state of affairs in the country during this COVID-19 pandemic. If you ask these people, they will tell you how many people are undergoing treatment for whatever ailment in the country at any point.
Yeah.
They are able to get this information. That's what they do, right? They are statisticians. Now, we've asked for feedback on what's happening around the country, in terms of patients with life-threatening ailments who still need to access healthcare. Some feedback.
Yeah, and I think probably Spice FM, the Situation Room, is becoming synonymous with this story, the issue of blood. And definitely it's here. So this is Shadi Rope. He's saying, good morning. We have a patient at MTRH, that's Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, who has leukemia. We've been told there's no blood. She needs blood group O negative, but difficult to get. We've looked for, but unsuccessfully. The health system in this country is at its lowest.
So this is blood group O negative.
Yeah. On your regular day, before COVID days, it was still difficult to access blood group O negative. Now we are in a situation where the task force that was de-gazetted had informed Parliament that we do not have a single drop of blood
Somebody who
in our blood
requires
banks.
O negative can only get O negative. Is it?
Can only get O negative.
And this is where the difficulty now comes in.
Exactly. So this is literally I don't know how to call it, a bad situation worse, or I don't know, because you only have to get O negative, and there's only a small population of people with O negative blood. Anyway, for this particular person, I will link them up with a group. There's a group of Kenyans who have O negative, who have come together because they know how difficult it is. So they're in a group of themselves. So when somebody needs O negative blood, they're able to communicate within themselves and help. So for this particular person, we'll help them out.
Shadi Rob, so we're going to sort this out for at least try and do the little that we can. So Dr. Marcy will link you up with this group. You can also link them up with the blood transfusion services, look at the region, what can they do in terms of mobilizing. And we'll load the appeal as well on social media. Amulioto, well, our social media manager will be able to load this up as well as a blood appeal for O negative for a patient at Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital in Eldoret. This person requires this blood today. I mean, they've got leukemia. They're undergoing treatment for leukemia. This is not something that we say, we wait for budget, 1.2 billion shillings.
Wait for some people to finish fighting.
Let's see what's happening here. The National Blood Transfusion Services.
We wait for that court case.
Court case to be concluded. This is not one of those. This one requires immediate attention. Let's do the best we can. Amulioto, start with you as Dr. Marcy puts them in touch.
Yeah, on Facebook, I think, if I remember well, they are the Greater O Negative group. You can look them up. And on Twitter, they go by the same Greater O Negative.
So the Greater O Negative group.
Yeah,
on Facebook and
Facebook
Twitter.
and Twitter, we can look them up. But I'll just get them to respond to this. But for me, this is sad, because how many people need blood, for example? How many people need this service immediately and cannot do that because of all of these other issues? And now we're saying COVID is a priority. I think for me, the priority would be to strengthen the base of the pyramid, to strengthen your primary health care, because in such circumstances, then you would either prevent somebody like this getting into such a situation so fast where they need blood, or if you are not even able to prevent it, you can delay the complication of the disease. And with delaying that complication, then you do this palliative care and you make sure that this person has quality of life. But now we're just firefighting.
Firefighting. Let's look at this this new survey by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. This survey is basically looking at what's happening around the country with the fight against COVID-19. It's called the Survey on Socioeconomic Impact of COVID-19 on Households. Okay. And it's covered nicely in the page 2 of the Standard with some infographics there. Just looking at that. In terms of jobs, 50% of workers have stayed at home because of the lockdown. So they were asking people, you work, are you staying at home? Yes. And why are you staying at home? At least 50% said, we are staying at home because of the lockdown, because of the order by the government to stay at home. All right. So people have been obeying the government. 91.2% of workers who are not sure when they'll return to their jobs. Now, this is something. Now we start from there. For how long do you expect to be at home? I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, it's expected anyway, because nobody knows. Even if you ask Mutahi Kagwe, for how long are we going to... He'll tell you, I don't know. We are looking at this. We are monitoring the situation on a daily basis. So we still don't know. In terms of health, 17% of those who are interviewed, the households reported to have a member with pre-existing medical condition. What am I saying?
Conviction. Which one?
Medical condition.
Condition.
All right.
17% of households reported to have a member with a pre-existing medical condition. And this is close to
What we've been talking about.
Yep. 99.4% of Kenyans who have heard about coronavirus. So in terms of awareness, that do people know what we're dealing with? Almost everybody knows that we have COVID-19, that we are fighting COVID-19. Now let's come to the economic issues. Rent, 8.7% of the households that got a waiver of relief from the landlords on rent for the month of April 2020. So less than 10% of tenants received a waiver from their landlords. 30.5% of households that were unable to pay rent during the crisis period. Imagine from February, you could pay rent. A month later, a third of the population cannot pay rent. 30%. Don't say 30, say 30%.
Break it down even more. So that means 1 in every 3 people that you meet is unable to pay their rent.
Yes.
So you meet 1, 2, 3. The third person will not be able to pay. The 6th person will not be able to pay.
Let me bring
the
it home.
9th person will not be able to
Between
pay.
the
their
three
rent.
One of us here
Between the
is
three
not
of
able
us.
to
Right
pay
here,
rent.
Yeah.
Somebody's not able to
Now
pay
that I'm
rent.
in the minority and everything, so it's unaweza nichangia kakitu.
So, I mean, that's it,
41.7% are saying of tenants that were able to pay rent on time, while 52.9%, this is more than half of tenants, who cited reduced income as the main reason for not paying rent. Half of the people who have not been able to pay rent are saying lost income. Transport, 51.7% overall increase in the cost of transport in Kenya. Okay. Life is getting more expensive. In Migori, 77.2% recorded the highest amount of increase in the cost of transport paid. Turkana, 24.4% recorded the lowest increase in transport cost. About 32.2% of the persons who used any means of transport in the last 7 days before the survey date reported that they had walked to work. Transport has become more expensive, so what are people doing? Walking. Economic activity. The percentage of distribution of persons by sex and labor force participation status. 34.7% of men that were unemployed during the crisis period, and 51.2% of women that were unemployed during the crisis period. Half of the women population that were employed before have lost their jobs. 34, more than a third again, of the men have lost their job. Sasa. Sasa when you know the Kenyan way, when niambie.
Niambie sasa.
Well,
When
I mean, yeah, we can look at the we can look at the surface of all of this, but I mean, just again, indicators of to really then how imbalanced things are. If we want to take that and go in that direction, and it comes to how imbalanced things are when it comes to gender and gender roles or specific positions then that you now give to the woman because of the fact that there are other things, one, that she has to do, especially if she's raising children, if she's taking care of the home. Some of the things that Mercy alluded to earlier. So you're not just a woman sitting in a house and then getting ready for yourself and then going. The other responsibility that you now take upon yourself, and then you take care of your extended family on both sides, you take care of children, you make sure that the house is running, and then on top of all of that, then you must go out and fend for yourself. And there's certain factors then that point to the reasons why women have these jobs. Number one, yes, they're lower paying. Then you need a face. We talked about the service industry. We talked about like nannies. We talked about wait staff. The majority of these individuals are women, and they're paid less money. And it's obvious that it's easier for in a lot of cases to pay a woman less than it is a man. And that has been established across board by men and women, that it's easier to pay a woman less. And so the collateral damage then, when you have something like this happening, would be the woman. And we look at a third versus 50%. So you can just imagine whereby it was already a difficult situation where women were trying to get the scraps under the table, as it were, and then enter a pandemic such as this. And then they have absolutely nothing. So just let your mind do a little bit of an audit of what that would be. Because the minority are these high-heeled, well-paid women in these corporate jobs. Those are the absolute minority.
True.
The majority of women are in this situation whereby they do not now have a source of income, and even when they did have it, they were being paid much less than an average man would have been paid. And I think these are things that need to be looked at still when we're looking at the balance of income, for example, when we're looking at the fairness or the advantage that is or should be given to women. It's clear that it's saying that, okay, even in these times, it's even more glaring that something must be done about this. I mean, we've come a long way. Whereas before, women were not even recognized as citizens. We've come a very, very long way. And I must say that. However, this shows us that there's still quite a lot that needs to be done and focused on or paid attention to when it comes to opportunities for women and balance when it comes to gender, and gender roles. And here just shows us that, look, we're still dealing with the same problems that we're dealing with 10 years ago.
And this gap will widen first between the rich and the poor, because here, if you're educated in a corporate job, chances are right now you're able to work from home. So you're able to make something, not necessarily what you're making before, but at least something to keep you going. If you're uneducated, if you're poor, if you're in the informal sector, and this data shows that 15 million people got their daily bread from the Juakali sector. If there's less demand, as we're seeing, lots that is happening, then that sector suffers the most quite easily. And therefore, if you're poor, you become poorer. If you're rich, then you're able to maintain, at least now with COVID, you can maintain somehow and survive through. But now, if you're getting poorer, then that gap becomes bigger. Now, bring in now the women, and where the disparity was already huge. 51% of women have lost their jobs. They were in the service industry. Now they're at home. They're not able to make anything. By the time they come back, or by the time people are bouncing back to start doing something, you have lost a significant amount of time. You've lost quite a big chunk. And therefore, for you to catch up, as opposed to your male colleagues who are already there and doing something, become difficult. So that gap is just going to widen. The disparity is just going to get worse. And we may have inevitably reversed some of the gains that we had made in this sector, where we were working on women empowerment and whatnot. So maybe we need to rethink how or what exactly we mean by women empowerment. Yes, it's good to have women in the service industry, but is it about time that we refocus them elsewhere? I know there's always a lot of push to have women in STEMI. Engineering, science, and all of these things, medicine. So is it about time then that we deliberately do that? How, when we're doing, the affirmative action, that we want 2/3 gender representation in all of these places, can we deliberately then make sure that our girls are making it into those courses that eventually, they can support themselves, so that when such shocks are in the economy, then you're unlikely to...
It would be important, it would be interesting to see, maybe delve deeper into the raw data that KNBS has, and seeing the people that have lost their jobs, in what sectors were they employed, and in what roles were they employed. So we can also see, all right, so this is an indication, but using the other data that KNBS has on the employment status and the genders and the division of genders across the various sectors of the economy, we see, so what are we talking about? So is this loss a bigger loss of jobs by women because of the sectors that they work in? Or is it because of them being more vulnerable, easier to dismiss? Or what is it that could cause this? I think there could be many other reasons, and those reasons we can only extrapolate by just getting into the data. But also, again, looking at what this data is showing us, is that we know that the government, and we spoke to CS Ukuriatani just the other day, and he was telling us, look, this is what the government immediately instituted as measures to cushion the economy from the ravaging impacts of COVID-19. But we are seeing a huge percentage of the population that has just been surveyed saying, well, we have lost income. We are not able to meet our basics. If you're not able to pay rent, the number one thing in that pyramid is not sorted. This is shelter. If you're not able to pay rent, are you also able to afford a proper meal, right? It would be nice to see what KNBS also has in terms of how are people being able to afford meals. If transport has gone up, that also has a huge impact. So did the measures that the government announced really have an impact on the vulnerable population? Or did those measures only benefit a small percentage? The CS was telling us that those measures, once you just institute those measures at that level, it's going to have a trickle-down effect across the country. Are we feeling that? Or are we not feeling that?
Well, I mean, it's obvious.
Because when you see that people have lost their livelihoods, okay, it's okay. People have lost their livelihoods, but then what happens after that? They have lost their livelihoods. They are not able to afford the basics. They are not able to afford rent. They're not able to afford food. They're not able to afford transport. They also don't have job security. They don't know when they're coming back to work. The number of people who say that they are out of work because they were laid off is also high. So, distribution of persons absent from work, but the main reason for absence. 49.9% said they were away because they were ordered to stay away or because of the lockout. Okay. Temporary slack work for technical or economic reasons, 16%. And then temporary layoff or work reduction, 13%. Other reasons, 6%. And those ones are maybe somebody who's a casual laborer who's off season, somebody who's away on leave, somebody who's on vacation, 1.9% only on vacation, illness or injury or temporary disability, 1.6%. You see, the larger population are away from work because either they've been told to stay away, or because, they've been told to stay away. That doesn't mean that they are still earning. They could be staying at home, either receiving a partial salary or receiving a full salary or not receiving any income at all. 50% of the population is at home. 16.6% is at home because of temporary slack of work. That is, work has reduced and stuff, or economic reasons. Other economic reasons, they're just at home. Or the other 13.4%, it's because of temporary layoff or reduction of work. Huge percentage of people are at home without an income. This is the bottom line of what we're saying. They're at home without an income. This has a trickle-down effect. The way Kuritani was telling us, trickle-down effect, this is it. If you're not able to buy food, it also means that the people who supply food are not getting an income. It means that the people in the market are not able to sell their wares. It means that the landlord here is not receiving an income. If the landlord is not getting an income, the landlord is added into this category of people who have no income.
Yeah, and if you add that with what you're saying, the raw data on where people are working, though it's not very specific as to where, is that almost half, 49%, are working were on account workers. That is, they had their own
jobs,
own businesses. And then 31.7 were paid employees outside the household. Now, the other persons, 10.1%, were a contributing family member, where you rely on somebody else to support you. So you can imagine if they have their own business, that they can no longer support you. The other one, smaller percentage, 3%, is a working employer. Then a much smaller percent are paid employee. So if you look at the bulk, is that people are supporting themselves basically. So if, let's say, you're in the service industry, you're providing even the food supplies, you're in the hotel business, it's your own business, then it has suffered a lot, and the ripple effect is significant. So the question now, as you have rightly asked, is how come we're not being cushioned?
The support, the cushion that the government was intended to cushion us with.
Is it a cushion on paper, on interviews?
Or could we be saying that this indicates that there's a cushion? Maybe the numbers could have been higher. Maybe it could have been looking much worse if those measures had not been put in place. Maybe.
It's interesting they say that,
someone could argue that way and say, you know what, before this, according to the data that we had before, looking at how people were living, we'd have expected. The projection was that this is how the situation was going to look like. Now, the reality is showing that there's a huge difference between the expected and the reality because of the
But
patience.
I'm thinking, a government which is keen on proving to its citizens that it's doing something. If it had cushioned employees or people, wouldn't it have showed up here? That, this is what we have done.
Part of the questions would have been,
Yeah. Have you received this? And I've actually highlighted it here on the paper. This cash transfer, it was unveiled. It's
Have
not
people
it's
begun
not
to receive
planning.
money? I think that's a basic
Yeah.
question that we're
the cash
asking
transfer
now.
for
Yes.
the elderly.
Have people begun
No.
to
Those ones
receive
have
this money?
received.
No, they're saying the
Okay.
government had unveiled cash transfer program that will see households in slums receive a stipend
Every
on a
week.
weekly
2,000
basis.
in 2 weeks.
Every week.
2,000 in 2 weeks. Yeah.
So, where is this?
Has-
Because then we
Remember,
Have people begun
let's
to
go.
receive this
Let's
money?
even
I think
go
that's
beyond
the basic
that.
question that
We
we're
were
asking
only
ourselves.
talking about 102,000 people in, I don't know, 8 counties. In Nairobi, which has the highest number, was about 20,000 people.
You mean to tell me that we're only
20,000
talking about
people are the
very
only ones who are gonna-
vulnerable people in Nairobi
the
at
co-
20,000?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
This is the data. This is the information that the PS
Let's-
for social protection said.
wait. Let's get
100,000
to the census report because that one
Impossible.
that is the server we are opening next.
Yeah. It's impossible.
No.
That
How
you
they
have
arrived at the
20,000
102,000 people is
One
the question.
One slum alone in Nairobi has more than 20,000 people.
Has
So what are we
hundreds
talking
of
about?
thousands.
Yep. And those are
And
the
what
ones.
is informing this decision? What data then is informing this 20,000 people plus in Nairobi? 102,000 people across the country are those that are in need of help.
Yep.
We're looking at entire industries that have been flattened. And this is unfortunate because I don't think we should only be looking at slums. The assumption is that it's only people in slums then who have
That
had
are
an issue,
vulnerable.
that are vulnerable. And it's people across board. Entire industries have been flattened. People have lost their job. I'm not talking about go on leave and then come back and work. Lost their job because the industry has shut
Go home.
down. Go home. What about them? This needs to be taken into consideration as well. So I'm really bothered as to what informs this decision because we've talked about the science of it and said by the time you arrive at a decision, something must have informed it. There must have been some data that you would have used to inform this decision. And we have national activities that are carried out every so often.
I think
Whether
for
it's
me,
the census, this or the other.
my problem
so you know the
is
numbers
the
that you have.
multiplicity of ways in which you're doing things.
That's
so there's
it.
the Ministry of Labour through the Social Protection Department is dishing out this 2,000 bob every 2 weeks to these 100 and something thousand people. The fund, the Jane Karuku
Yes, the
Harambe
fund,
that we are contributing to is supporting other people. The government through the other vulnerable is supporting others. The county governments are supporting others.
Then
and
there's
all
the
those
Vijana something also.
the kazi kwa vijana
Right.
that is paying people who the other day were complaining are here in South B. They were up in arms saying, look, we have collected all the rubbish here and we have still not
We're
been
done.
paid.
Yeah.
Is also dealing with another, 600. It was aiming to employ some 200,000 youth. All those things, are they, can we see the bigger picture? Are they actually putting together the pieces to show us the jigsaw puzzle of a smiley face? Maybe, maybe not. That's the information that
The
we
smile
lack in
might
this
turn
particular
down
case.
in this case. The jigsaw puzzle might turn to a frowny face at this point.
Let's go to the top of the hour. In the next hour, we'll be speaking to an economist to look at this, the measures that the government has put in place and what the government needs to do in the next budget, the next financial year. Wangari Muikia, economist, will be with us. Today's proverb: instruct a man, you instruct an individual; instruct a woman, you instruct a nation. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.
So there's a horror, not just in the studio, but also on Thika Road this morning. Things are not moving. Traffic trying to get to the CBD, that's not happening. Trying to get to the Pagani underpass is going to take you a little bit longer than it normally would. It seems that everybody is out and about. All right, on the southern bypass this morning at the Ngong interchange, there seems to be a bit of an issue there as well. Traffic has slowed down. Ngongoro is the latest parking lot this morning, not moving as much as we'd like it to. So you might want to use an alternate route this morning. So that's where we see the issues this morning. Mombasa Road is not looking too bad right now. You'll be able to get where you're going. So traffic overall, we're looking at not too terrible situation. If you do see something out of the ordinary or out of order, let us know. We'll spread the word and at least keep people safe and not approaching those areas. Spice FMKE, that's how you can reach us on Twitter.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and
Good morning.
Eric Latin,
Good to see you.
agent provocateur,
Good
the
morning.
man in the chair, seasoned
It was a
journalist,
good morning at
news
6
hound,
a.m.
a man who
until
believes in
we
punch.
delved into the
unfolds.
paper, and all of these things, you're looking at the paper and I'm thinking, surely one of these fine days there has to be something positive that
Something
we can talk
has
about.
got to give
We
at
ha-
some point, man.
Really, there has to be something, because when you look at all of these things, all of these things are very key, yet we're back into political headlines, full-blown politics, as I call it.
That's what I was telling you. We need to make these people stop earning money. As long as they're earning money, then life goes on. Okay?
Can they get 99% pay cut?
Why are
on
they getting
everything?
99?
So that we just give them 1%
They should
for
stop.
being around.
We should send them home. You see those people, that the Kenyans who are saying, I'm at home, I have lost my income. We should start with these politicians. Every politician, home, no income. Then we will we use the other people. We have very many other people who can help us. What do we need? We need to start thinking about budget and how to pass the next budget. All right, so the guys at the National Treasury, they can do that. The guys at the Ministry of Planning, which is still the National Treasury, they can do that. We can bring in experts like economists, like the one we brought to talk to, Wangari Muikia. She's a public finance management expert. She can help, come up, draft one or two things in the next financial budget. And then in the final minute, we just call MPs, wait, Sema, yes, Sawa.
Go.
We are good.
We move.
In the meantime. So let's just go back to where we were, okay? There's data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. They conducted a survey. They're about to begin the next survey from tomorrow to look at the impacts going forward. So what they are showing us is a huge percentage of our population has lost an income. Because of that, there's a huge percentage of our population that is unable to meet the basics, that is afford food and afford shelter. If you cannot pay rent, you're basically saying that you're not able to put a roof over your head, right? A huge percentage, more than 50% of those who have lost jobs are women. 30% of those who have lost jobs are men. Then we immediately we went into COVID. We had these measures that were announced by the government to cushion the economy and going forward, and those were rolled out. And we spoke to the CS for the National Treasury and Planning, and they told us, look, budget making is a complex thing. You guys need to understand.
Yeah.
When we say that there's a reduction by 2% of VAT, 2%, it has a trickle-down effect because the cost of production comes down, the cost of the goods come down, and therefore the people in the grassroots are able to afford their food. It's going to be cheaper. All right. When we say that there's a reduction in the amount of corporate tax to be paid by companies, what we are saying is we are increasing the liquidity of those companies so that those companies are able to retain their staff a bit longer. Even if you don't have as much revenues, you can still afford to pay your staff even a percentage of their pay. That trickle-down effect. When we say that those who earn 24,000 and below, which is a majority of those in formal employment, are going not to pay as you earn, it means that we are putting cash in their hands. They receive a salary. They are not going to pay this tax. They have more money. And when they have more money, we have said they have more spending power. When they have more spending power, then they are able to buy. When they are able to buy goods and services, they are supporting the economy. See that picture? Looks very well on paper. Then the data comes out. People cannot pay rent. data comes out that we have very many vulnerable people in the population who are unable to live. So the question, therefore, is, are those measures good measures? Did those measures actually make sense? Were those the best measures that our government could have put in place?
Are those measures formed by are they informed properly? Because you take a measure and it must be informed. By the time you're making this decision, something informed that. It's not just because it seems like you then just pulling things out of the air. If truly the data that you have, the information that has been presented to you is what then fuels this decision, then I wouldn't have a problem with that. But it seems that this is totally different. And I don't want us to be on this crutch of we don't have the money. No, stop it. Tell me something else. It's not about that. Unfortunately, it cannot
Maybe we
be.
don't.
I beg.
Let's ask the people who actually, have some insiders in government, and that's one of the people we're talking to this morning. Wangari Moikia, she's a public finance management specialist. She is a lead consultant with Expertise Global Consulting. Wangari, good morning.
Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Good morning,
Good morning,
Wangari.
Wangari.
Everybody's not doing well. I'm the only one who's okay, a little bit okay.
Clearly, I've been listening in and things I think in the studio.
And I'm not okay. I've reached that point where I'm like, we're all gonna die.
So you're actually doing worse than us, guys.
So I mean,
I guess everybody's asking themselves, but did you die?
yeah, but did you die? So just leave, man. Just leave. So Wangari, you've had the conversation. We're asking ourselves. The government had come up with these measures. They on paper they say those are very good measures. They go a long way. Instead of just giving people handouts left, right, and center, they go a long way. At the same time, there's also handouts. There's handouts to the vulnerable population. There's handouts now to 100,000 very vulnerable people. There's also cash handouts to the youth, and these are not handouts. They're basically being made to collect rubbish, and then they're paid. Are these good measures?
Well, to some extent they are, and I think in the time when they were making these decisions, they were trying to make it in a very high pressure period where they're trying to do something quickly. So some may have hit the mark, and some may not have hit the mark. So let's go through some of the things that we think could have been thought of better. So you talked about the VAT, you talked about income tax, you talk about the reliefs that are coming to the vulnerable. Now, giving the people who are earning 24,000 or less a tax relief, you have to think that before we were also thinking, the people who were receiving reliefs previously were, I think, earning 19,000 or less.
Yep.
So the only new people who are getting tax reliefs are between that bracket of, I think, 19,000 and 24,000. And exactly. So so it's not like that relief is really reaching the people down, because the people who are vulnerable were already not paying that tax.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's why we see the KNBS report saying that people are still in stress, because those people are already in stress.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Yeah.
So
it's not a new situation. Now, when we move now to the question of cash transfers. Now, cash transfers are kind of a bump in revenue or income for people who are in vulnerable households, right? So if you are talking about cash transfers to them, cash transfers are not something that you can live off of,
Yep.
right? They're like 5,000 shillings every 2 months or something like that. Can you really pay rent? Can you really have food on the table? Can you be paying electricity, water without money? No. It's a little bit of a bump up. Now, if someone has completely lost their job, and then now the government is sitting around and giving cash transfers, yes, any money is good money. Let me not even front and say 5K cannot make a difference, but it's definitely not going to be able to sustain you going forward.
because it's a one-off anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, it is a one-off. But then I think they're going to do it over a period of time, maybe like 3 months or 6 months or something like that.
Which cash transfer are you talking about? Are you talking about the one for the vulnerable population?
Yes, for the vulnerable population.
Those ones, they already received their 8,000.
But then what can 8,000 do if you have a household, you're with your shosho in the house,
That's
you're
it.
yourself, you have children. First of all, let's remember these children are not in school, And
Yep.
in school they have school feeding programs. Yeah, so now there's even more food that you have to pay. I was doing this webinar the other day, and there was a lady, a casual laborer, talking on the webinar. And she was saying that now she has a deni with a mama mboga on the corner, because now she has to take more and more vegetables
Yep.
to feed her household.
Yeah.
So people now are even going into debt.
Yep.
It's really a tragic situation. What I would have advised the government is to think about how they can provide in-kind reliefs, where it really hits the people in their pocket, Give people free electricity for a period. Give them free water for a period. Give them free access to Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi is becoming the game changer in this pandemic period, right? If you give them at least those three, and even some sort of rent reliefs, some ability to keep a roof over their heads, once you keep those basic things, then now we can deal with the other big issues going forward.
So I can see how we can do electricity. We just dealing with Kenya Power. We can say that we'll put in some money into KPLC. We can say we'll put in some money into the water management companies, the water companies. All right.
Yes, that is where it will make a difference.
Rent. How do we get this done? How would the government work towards giving rent relief to tenants?
Well, this is now, we need to ask ourselves. The national government has been doing a lot of these interventions. But what about the county governments? Have you heard about the county governments doing any work or contribution to this? I haven't heard any.
No.
Now, county governments, they charge this thing called ground rent or plot rent, where they charge people to live on county land.
Okay.
Yeah. What they could do is provide for people to, some sort of amnesty not to pay that rent over the period, and so that they can have, a place to stay without, thinking about paying rent. So those are some of the things that the government do, especially on government-owned land.
Oh, so for now we say, for example, the county houses in Nairobi, especially in the Eastlands estates. So we are basically telling them don't pay rent for the next X number of months.
Exactly.
Because their landlord is the county government.
Exactly. That is where the government now has the power. But then now with private landlords, now the government provided for, a reduction in the cash reserve ratio. They reduce the costing that are come at the central bank. Yeah. Right? So this was supposed to trickle down to the banks, so the banks then can follow on with loans to people who are vulnerable businesses, such as people who own rental properties. But the problem is, and this is in economic terms, it's called quantitative easing, right? Allowing people to access financing or liquidity from the central bank machinery. But the problem is, even if you give money to the banks, it's not a requirement it's not, the banks are not required to then pass that money down to the citizens, because the banks are also thinking about their own risks that they have to deal with, right? They can't just give money to anybody. They have to assess who is good for their money, who should be given money, who has been having a good, strong business. There's all those processes, right? So the money has been released to the banks, but the banks may not be releasing that money down to the people who actually need them. And that is where there's also a big block.
Should the banks be made to release this money? I mean, look, the central bank has sat down, has said, this is what we're going to do to help your customers. And then the bank sits there and still operates like it's business as usual. Should we not be changing this?
This is where agreements have to be entered with banks, because banks are also private companies, right? They can't be made to do what they can't afford to do. They also have their own risk management systems. If you're telling them go and rent to this guy who has a rental property in Kibera and he has not been collecting rent anyway, when are they going to get that money back?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of complexities when it comes to how that money trickles down from the central bank down to the person who actually is it on the ground. But if that was working, then the rental property owners would be able to get some money from the banks to be able to tide them over this period.
So that's why I'm wondering, so how do we make it work? Already, this measure has been put in place, the CBR rate and all these others, and the cash reserve ratio. All these have been taken into consideration by the regulator, by the government, by the central bank. And then here is the financial sector that is saying, all right, but I've got to assess my risk again. I've got to look at it. So it's not getting to the intended recipient. It's only the bank now that is operating with higher liquidity. How do we make the banks push this thing down? How do we, I think just looking at a clogged pipe, insert something there to push this thing through.
For real, Eric, it's really tricky. You have to get into agreements. You have to start giving loan guarantees. You have to start, making sure that they feel confident enough to send that money down to the people who need it.
So why can't this be done?
Easy. And actually, quantitative easing is it's very controversial way of providing for liquidity in the economy. So now we are thinking, well, if quantitative easing is not going to work, what else do we have in our toolbox to work?
Wangari, as we look at this, there are many ideas that are being pushed out here. At the end of the day, we were dealing with an already depressed economy. However way we want to look at it, Kenya was dealing with a depressed economy. Then add all these other things that we've added on top of it and say that now we are trying to help people. The question that we are being asked often is that can we get to a place where really a government does not have the money to be able to have bailout programs for its people? Is that the point that we are at?
You know, what I would say to the government is that after this whole pandemic, or even now when we're thinking about how this pandemic is affecting us, what do we need to inbuild in our systems to make sure that we can withstand shocks?
Exactly.
Now, my thinking is that we need to have that, what I'm calling underlying resilience within the country, to be able to have a strong foundation that will not sway us. How does this come through? You've already talked about it, you guys. You talked about health. Health is one of the primary foundations, right? People need to be healthy to be able to go to work. People need to be healthy to go to school, right?
Yes.
So we need a strong health sector. We need a strong education sector. One of my biggest fears is that we're going to come out of this and the education sector is just going to be the same, right?
We will not have learned any lessons.
Yeah,
Or
we're
worse.
all homeschooling our kids, right?
Yep.
Have you seen what they're being taught? Do you think they stand a chance against those people in Denmark or the US? Right? We need to be asking ourselves, how is my child going to be the next person who's going to, develop the next technology after AI? Right?
Yeah.
We're looking at our education system, and I really think it's failing. Now, education is one of the highest funded sectors in the budget, but I think we are not prioritizing or rethinking what the best education package is for our kids, right? So health education. And then I think I would also argue symbols of national systems and symbols of national unity. And you know why I say this? Because I'm seeing so many communities that are saying, they're working wamama on the corner.
Yep.
They're looking for work, but there are security risks. So what we're going to do is we're going to start building higher fences because these guys now, we think we're going to be robbed. That is exactly the opposite attitude we should be cultivating right now.
Yeah.
If we had strong systems of community, what we would be doing is saying, they are working wamama on the corner. We need to think about how we can provide...
How we can support them, even if they don't get a job.
Economy. Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so kind of bringing together our society and our communities to be able to help each other. Because, we know government doesn't move quickly. It's community that will move quickly.
I almost hear you saying that we probably need to take steps towards having a welfare arm of the state.
I wouldn't say welfare, no. I would say we need to strong cultural symbols. Even it sounds a little bit, I don't know what to call it. But,
Welfare.
the people we are proud of, not welfare, symbols that bring us together. And we say that bring us and say we're all Kenyans, we're all able to, we're all working in this economy and we're all contributing into this economy. We need to support each other. Right? So I think those strong symbols.
Wangari, looking at what is happening now, what has happened with the COVID pandemic, and you seeing education is our most funded sector. Do you think now, and what we're seeing, what COVID has done to not just us but globally, that health then is the most important part of any economy? That with a good health system, then your shocks would not be as bad as we're seeing now. And therefore, we need to rethink and reconsider funding health significantly so that we avert such a situation in future, because this is not the last pandemic that we are seeing.
Well, it's one of the core ones, but it's not the only one. So we need to make sure we have good health. We have to make sure we have good education. We need to make sure that we are able to build from within. Now that we have been sequestered within Kenya, we're not flying out, we're not doing anything with other countries, or we're doing minimal things with other countries. How can we build our internal systems? We're big on agriculture in Kenya, but are we big on agribusiness? We need to think about how we take it to the next level, value chains. We need to make sure ICT is working because that's where people are operating in this world, yeah? We need to think about our environment. If our environment is strong, if our wildlife is also thriving, then we can also build on that, right? We are talking about tourism being the biggest foreign exchange earner. if we are not taking care of the core that is bringing in this foreign exchange, then we are eating, into our own, we're eating ourselves without making sure that we're building ourselves up. We need to you guys were talking about, planning. Kenyans were the best planners, but implementation, nothing.
What's our problem? Where is that gap? What goes wrong where?
Sometimes, let me tell you, Eric, I've done so many studies, I've done so many trainings, but where I'm seeing the problem is that every year, without fail, I'm called to do those same plans and those same trainings for the same group of people. So I'm wondering, is it that I was not talking properly? Or is it that my information is not communicating? I think people are just not in that implementation frame of mind. They have the plans. We have beautiful plans. I mean, see, people are always talking about how Singapore came and just took our plans and all they did is implement it.
Rwanda the same.
Ethiopia.
Exactly. Yeah, but another thing that you guys were talking about was systems, right? If the systems were working, we would have been able to deal with this much easier. Now, I know guys are going to bite off my head, but Huduma number. If Huduma number had been working,
had rolled out nicely,
been able to get, we would have been knowing these guys who are suffering from cancer, who need what was Dr. Caregiver talking about, the
palliative care.
Palliative care.
Palliative care, yes.
But doesn't the census report give you this data already anyway?
We have it.
The census report is even more comprehensive.
Books to start looking for that data.
It's there.
You need it digitized.
But it's already digitized.
It's already digitized.
Remember the census, they came with those gadgets.
Came with gadgets.
And they asked you all these questions.
They were all writing it down.
Right? You have to make sure that the system can pick up that data. You can't just put it in an Excel sheet and just be like, so the data is there, or it has been collected in a big database. It has to be a database that's queryable to say, we need to find the people who are vulnerable, and then, it's coded in a way that you can immediately reach these people. And by the time those guys are coming to the border at Blue Post, they have a gadget that they give their Huduma number, and then the government has said everybody with this coding from A to Z will be able to access because they need care. Yeah. So Huduma number would have been perfect if it had been rolled out properly, if we had,
plan versus implementation.
Planning, exactly. It would have been great.
Coming back to the issue of how we are good at planning and then how bad we are at implementation. Is it a result of not wanting to work? Because you see, writing a plan, you just sit down and create a plan and you feel so good about yourself that you did this so well. Much of it, of course, is copy-paste from last year's plan. Remember that lady that we had hired last year, Wangari? She did a very nice paragraph on this. Just go and copy that and post it here. and then combine this. And then we can call her to come and do some training here and there. And then we can pay her, you get some money. And then we're busy. But when it comes to implementation, means you work. It means that you actually now get off your desk and start doing things. Probably I think COVID is exposing the nature of our public system, our civil service.
Exactly.
And where
if I was a president or if I was a leader in this society, I would call all the CSs into the Zoom call of all Zoom calls. And just have a plan and say, you guys, we need to jambua this thing from start to finish.
Yep.
Where health is not working, but health doesn't stand on its own. Health is linked to transport systems, it's linked to energy, it's linked to water, it's linked to everything. So let's think about how we can create a system that is an interconnected network, that when point A is in stress, point B immediately can react to provide some relief or whatever it is. I would throw out all the books, use them as a library resource, and then just take pieces and say, let's use this, and then make a system that works. I hope the president is listening to me today.
But I wouldn't think, I wouldn't even see the problem as being the CSs anyway. They keep on changing every now and then. But the people who are supposed to work and do the things remain the same. The civil servants are still the same people who are there last year or there this year. If they're used to doing things in a particular way, even if you come with grand ideas, they'll still do their own things the way they do.
I'm not even talking about the person. I'm talking about the post. You talk about the person in that leadership position. And once they bring leadership and bring all these people together, those civil servants who have been there for 40, 50 years, right? They will be able to come with some solutions. But the problem also with government is sometimes we work very much in silos. I worked for some time in government, and in as much as we try to be collaborative, it's very difficult. I mean, to get one letter from one ministry to another, you know, you have to write an actual letter, not an email.
No.
And then you're writing it to do it Gmail or Yahoo.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's very, some of these basic foundational things that I'm talking about with underlying resilience. Make sure you have a system that works. Make sure you have a way of getting information from point A to point B efficiently, and the people who need to be notified are notified. You know, invest in those now so that when, you know, X hits the fan, you can deploy immediately.
Let's talk about some of these things. I introduced you as somebody who, because you've worked in government, also because you work with government, because of what the nature of work that you do, I'm sure you study a lot of data from government. Do we have money in this government, Wangari?
Tuko na pesa ngapi?
You know why?
You know, there's a reason why we're called
I want to whisper.
a low middle in the...
I want to whisper this so that they don't hear. You know, there was supposed to have been 1.2 billion shillings to buy some kits for community health volunteers, okay? And now we are not going to be able to do that. We'll have to wait for the next budget. And very many other things that we are saying, you know, atuna pesa. We cannot support more vulnerable people because we don't have money. We cannot support... So do we have money?
Let me tell you, this thing, Dr. Caregiver was talking about the community health workers and community health volunteers. You're not going to resolve that thing with just providing one kit in 1 year. It's going to help, yes, this year. I'm not going to deny. But we should have been resourcing them from the start. Those guys are so important. These are the guys who they take their own bicycle, they go down to Mashinani deep.
Yep.
They bring, medicine, they bring information, they help people, they become actually pillars of the community, right?
Yeah.
But are they given stipends? No. This is out of their own pocket. This is out of their own time. They put so much of their own resources in delivering this kind of level 1 healthcare. It's insane how much you expect these people who are already vulnerable themselves to then now resource people who are vulnerable. But I guess societies is societies. Sometimes the people who are low income are the people who support each other the most.
Yes.
Right? So yes, it is much needed. This package is so much needed. But we should have been doing these things from Zamani, right? We can't just say this year they didn't get it. They should have been getting it. And if I'm talking about revamping this health system, you start with the level 1s. These community health workers, community health volunteers. If you get that working, let me tell you, the system is it's not going to trickle down to the highest level because you'll have already dealt with it at the lowest level.
We're not even getting that kit this year.
The problem is not the money.
The problem is prioritization.
There we go.
You can have 10 shillings and you can have 10,000 shillings. Some people can be able to get so much more out of that 10 shillings than someone who has 100,000 shillings can get out of that money, right? It's just about how you think to deploy that money in the best way in the places that will have the best impact.
But Wangari, if you're talking about prioritization, here we are saying no, we don't have 1.2 billion to kit the community health volunteers who would man our level 1 facilities. But universal healthcare is our agenda, big agenda priority. We want to roll out universal healthcare. It doesn't make sense to me.
Because government is this big elephant that moves very slowly. By the time UHC had been planned and now it's being rolled out, do you know how long it took to get there? Then suddenly we're coming to say, oh no, we can't do this. And they're like, easy plans, we have planned, we have talked to 50,000 people, public participation, ilipanywa, everybody has agreed. We can't just decide one day we're going to stop and say, now this 1.2 billion, we're going to cut it. But
Wangari, sorry to cut you short there. This 1.2 billion that goes to community health volunteers is a cog in that UHC monster that you're talking about. It's not even a cog, it's the base of that UHC thing. So if that is going to give you a good foundation, how do you say it's an elephant that moves very slowly? Yet this is the one that will give you a stable base for you to now be able to do all these other things.
It's your legs.
Yeah,
exactly.
Doctor, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying that money has to get there. The reason why it's not getting there is because this elephant cannot move fast enough. This elephant is saying, by the time I decide to now redeploy this 1.2 to community health workers, we have to go back through the whole system to start telling people and sensitizing and citizen engagement and all these things. And that's the problem with our system. Those things are important for budget, but then they also slow things down so much. And government is just like that. It's just a very slow-moving animal.
All right. I have to ask you now at this point is that we've been able to point out all of these things and we see where the problems are. And obviously government knows that they're not moving as fast or as efficiently as they should. They can't say that they don't know this. This is glaringly obvious to everybody. Don't you think then that they would want to do something about it? Because we could talk this thing out until we're blue in the face. We could talk about it and say, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem. But then in order for us to stop having a problem, then obviously something needs to be done about it. Is there some kind of awareness? I mean, from where you've been and where you've stood, where you've worked and walked, is there the desire to change this or to turn things around? Because if not, then I dare say we're doomed.
That is a question that I ask myself. I'm not sure whether there's a desire. I honestly, in some parts you find there's a very strong desire, in some parts you'll not find any inkling of a desire at all. I think I really worry about where Kenya will be at post-COVID. And I think it's because we are not really changing in the fundamental ways that we may need to change to cope in a post-COVID world. Now, if you look at the US, Italy, all these people who are hit hard, China, these are the people who, define the global marketplace, right? And if they change their systems because they had to make such deep changes in their economy, and we didn't have to make those types of deep changes that this country made, by the time they're coming out of their situation and starting to rapidly innovate and change to adapt, we're still in the same scenario that we were before. Guys are still here, busy on the streets, working. Yes, we have been affected in, people are working from home, service industries is been affected very much, right? But we may not change in the fundamental ways that these big countries that shape the world are change. Yeah.
Let's take a short break, Wangari. We'll take a look at traffic and then continue this conversation. When we come out of this break, we will look at how our budget should look like. So we are already seeing that statements that have been taken to Parliament. The National Treasury wants to tax us a bit more. It has to raise some money. But then how should our budget look like so that it can support those of us who will be vulnerable? And this, we are talking about 47 million Kenyans coming out of COVID. Everybody is going to be a vulnerable person. So, how should we deal with that? Just keep it right here. We're speaking with Wangari Muikia. She's a public finance management specialist. And this is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. 27 minutes to 9.
Traffic along Mombasa Road this morning is a stretch inbound, slow but moving, and it'll take you a little while, but you'll be fine. It's moving slowly on Thika Road as well from Muthaiga and then trying to get into the city centre. Okay, now I see there's a bit of an issue in Kisumu, but it's entirely in Kijaluo. So I would need to find out what that means to be able to spread the word about that, right? So maybe you want to give me a little bit more information as far as that's concerned. All right. Apart from that, it doesn't seem too bad around other parts of the city and the country. So we will ask you to tweet us on SpiceFMKE. That's on Twitter. Let us know what you see. But for now, traffic is not causing any problems this morning. Conversation continues.
Spice up your life.
Here, public finance management specialist. She's the lead consultant with Expertise Global Consulting. Wangari,
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Daniel is calling in from Kisumu and he's got a burning question. So let's just hear what Daniel has to ask, or maybe Daniel has to contribute.
Mornings
Daniel, good morning.
done right.
Good morning. Good morning.
How are you?
Yes, fine, thank you. How is the team?
The team is fine.
Thanks.
We're fine.
Yes, I'm Daniel. I'm from Kisumu. and I'm a community health volunteer.
Uh-huh.
And it's a very important discussion that you brought on board. And to contribute on this, I can say that the community health volunteers are not capacitated and well facilitated to do their job. In terms of mobility, remunerations, and or a token of appreciation, they are the front for health providers in primary health care. And you'll realize that in Kisumu here, we have a very, very big problem in terms of remuneration and the tools that the CHVs have. The CHVs only do have, the kits that they have is only contains malaria testing kits and some malarial drugs. They don't have any other equipment that they can do their work. And apart from that, there is also a time that maybe Dr. Mercy Koril knows about the data capturing book called the MOH 513. They don't have it at all. And at times, in terms of remunerations, Kisumu has only relied on the non-governmental organization to finance the CHPs, and they are not in the payroll. But there is also this bureaucracy that is going on, in which the focal person is always being engaged in terms of remunerations of these CHVs. But it's very, very funny that these are the people that are operating, and even the challenges that they face, going even to the gated communities, where they always being humiliated. So when it comes to issues of CHVs, I think it should not be a boardroom matter. These people should come on the ground and see whatever people the CHVs are going through. Because these women and men, at times they spend sleepless nights dressing the defaulters, defaulters. But whatever they get in return, they don't even get something in return.
They don't get anything.
An NGO comes on board and give them a token of appreciation. Last year we had Afia Ali, who was financing, and Access Kenya. But the county government of Kisumu has gone mum about this issue of CHVs. That's why even
it's a big issue.
Even the training itself, training is selective in that those people who are on the top brass, the focal person and the public health officers, they go to the training, leaving these people who are supposed to go to the field to who are going to interact with these people on the field.
I think we will actually set aside some time to discuss the CHVs comprehensively and see what exactly is happening in this, because like you've said, these are the very most important cog in ensuring that universal health coverage works. Thank you very much, Daniel, for your contribution this morning.
Okay, welcome.
And keep listening.
Thank you.
So, Gary, coming back to this conversation, and you've heard what somebody who's actually a community health volunteer is saying in terms of just even getting basic remuneration, being basic equipment, just facilitating them to do the job that they have volunteered to do. It's still not working. And you've said this is a lot of back and forth. This elephant just not moving. The elephant is feeling an itch on its tail, but it really can't scratch its tail because of whatever many other reasons that we have. Now let's look at the budget. Finance Bill 2020 is before Parliament. It's already raising furore. People are saying some of the provisions there are tax more, raise more revenue. 2.7 trillion shilling budget. I don't even have a question. Just say.
Presented there, deal.
So I looked at this finance budget, and actually we're also going to be discussing a tweet chat today. On one end, the government has given tax relief. But now what I think the government is trying to do is to find a way to plug that hole that has been created, right? So now that's why we're starting to see digital service tax, which I have no idea how that's going to be implemented. How are you going to catch guys in the internet to make them pay? Yeah. Then we have like this voluntary.
They may borrow from Uganda. Uganda has done it exceedingly well.
Really? Exceedingly well, you would say?
Well, if we're going to use
Would beg to
comparative analytics here, yes.
This is the voluntary tax disclosure, which I think is a good idea, but is it really going to happen in practice? If you're not paying taxes, are you going to go and put yourself there and say, I have not been paying taxes now, I need
No
to
way.
taxes? Yeah, so I think some of these things, plans, like we said, plans are there, but implementation, we've not really thought about it too much. Yeah. We need to really be thinking about how we can widen the tax bracket. People who are already there, people already paying taxes. The informal sector, as we said, 80% of business in this country is informal. How do we get them to formalize? And we need to think about practical, realistic solutions that we can implement to get people on board.
Yeah, but the word around is that you cannot tax yourself to prosperity. So if you're even widening the tax bracket or how you can get your taxes, is it something that we can say is sustainable?
But government operates on the taxes from revenues from taxes. Yeah. So if you're going to have these plans of healthcare, education, security, environment, agribusiness, you need something to do. You need some money to deploy those plans. And that money comes from taxes. Right? So it's really, we need the revenues, but it's about the planning. How well are we deploying those resources to now get to a place of increased development?
So looking at a post-COVID period, what would an ideal budget or prioritization be so that you and I, everyone who's listening, can have an easier time recuperating, getting back into, some sense of normalcy, new normal as it will be then?
I think we need to ask ourselves, I guess, this question of underlying resilience, right? What is going to backstop our ability to thrive? Like I said before, we need to make sure that we are healthy people. The environment that we live in is also thriving. And we have to make sure that in our brains, we have the wherewithal to innovate, to learn and innovate, right? From there, we can start to build from within. We can now start thinking about business and innovation and AI and new ideas on how we can actually grow our economy. And then once we start thinking of these ideas and having those, then we can start to implement. Once we've created those plans, now to say, how can we take this plan to fruition? Right? So I think if we think of those as three main pillars of how to think about the budget, then everything else follows. Right?
So what
in the past
would that budget finance? Yes.
In the past budgets, our highest expenditures have been in energy, in education, and public administration and international relations. Now, do you even know what public administration and international relation is?
What's that?
Nobody knows.
Maintaining
right?
our embassies or what?
If you start looking at
paying our quota to IGAD, EAC, UN.
Now, you start thinking, is that really a priority for us as a nation, right? Health is number 7 when you think about our budget, in how it's been resourced, right? You think about water, it's number 6, right? It's really down in the priorities, right? We are prioritizing the wrong things, I think. Yeah.
So if we say that our immediate budget, the budget that's going to be read by Ukuri Yatani next month, should focus on how to, let's say, make Kenyans start living again, because right now we are basically not living. What did it fund immediately? So we can say, yes, put a little bit more money into health, because right now people are not going to hospital. They definitely will start going to hospital in large numbers after this. So what else, in terms of everybody who's lost their job and their companies are not going to reopen, what should the budget do to help those people?
Well, you have to put in some short-term measures. The cash transfer programs is a good way to think about plugging some of the immediate concerns that are happening with the most vulnerable populations. The challenge with cash transfers is that the systems that exist now, someone was talking about 20,000 people who are getting relief. It's because that system had those names already. Now, we have to think about how do you add more names as people start getting more vulnerable, especially in this situation. And it's not easy because there are a lot of criteria through which people need to be assessed before they're accepted in those programs. Yeah. In other quarters, in other countries, they decided to relax those criteria and start to get people in. And of course, there's going to be a lot of inefficiencies. Some people are going to slip in that don't need relief. But we need to that's going to be the price that we have to pay because the greater good, I think, is what we should be concerned about. But I would really like to see a budget that concentrates much more on healthcare, much more on education. And even, like I said, education is one of the highest funded sectors. But it's not just about prioritizing a sector. It's about looking, how does that sector work? How does it interact with other sectors? How does it address the issue of underlying resilience, right? So we need to restructure the sector in and of itself.
Okay, it sounds to me like homeschooling has really had a revelation for you. What?
You guys, I'm looking at
you're
what my
speaking
child
like
is learning, and I'm like,
from practical
how?
experience. What have you noticed? What have you observed?
I'm just concerned that some of these things are not practical, and that, if I look at some of my friends in other countries, they're like, we're teaching our kids how to be creative and how to one is starting a business, another one is, providing ideas, to her peers, her peer group, and providing support to the communities. And ask me, what is my child doing? My child is learning about Tidri. Mount Kenya is a mountain it's good to know GHP, it's good to know those things, but we need to think, how is this information empowering us?
At least you know your country. You know your country.
Wangari, my sister, I hear you. I understand. I have to ask you, though.
It's important to know where you mine diatomite, where you get fluorspar in this. It's important to know Kariandusi. If you don't know those things, then you're not good at all.
Where you can mine gold in this country,
Yeah, I want to know. And then some people are like, you should make sure the kids too much screen time and all of that. But when I think about some of the kids who are going to be changing the world 20, 30 years from now, are those the people we're telling them, 1 hour of screen time, and then in 30 years they're expected to be, doing AI and virtual reality using those same screens? Yet us guys are saying, I don't know, we need to think through these things more holistically. And I'm not an expert at this. I just noticed that they are cracked.
Well, I mean, just from what you see and what you understand, I mean, you said a few seconds ago that you would like to see a budget that was fueled by how the country looks, what the outlook of the country is. So are we saying that, at the risk of telling the truth, that the budgets that we see are actually not reflective of what is happening in the country?
The budgets are reflective of the key, like the big four vision of the president, right? I would put it to you that we need to restructure that big four vision, right? We need to make sure that the fundamentals are in place, and then everything else will take care of itself. If we're educated, if we're healthy, and we have a good environment to live in, the rest will take care of itself.
Let's open the phone line so we can get some questions from our audience. 0719-012-600. We are speaking with a public finance management specialist, Wangari Moikia. She is an economist. She understands economics and what's happening. Now, Wangari, as well as we're looking at this data, the data that came out of the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics yesterday, indicating how battered we have been by this COVID-19. What do you read of it? So there's the first thing, many people have lost their jobs. We are also looking at the gender parity. More than half of the women population have lost their job. 30% of the men have lost their jobs. Many don't know when they're ever going to come back, into employment or into any sort of income. The other data is also showing us that life has become expensive. Transport is more expensive. They cannot afford rent. Food is more expensive. So what now?
Yeah. I'll talk about one thing that I've been thinking about lately, and this is the country's ability to respond to emergencies, right? We have this thing in the budget called the emergency funds, and that's at the national level and at the county level. Each county should have an emergency fund. So even as a first step, this should have been the first budget that we should have been deploying and saying there's an emergency, let's think about how to budget for this emergency and deploy those funds haraka. But when you look at the framework around emergency funds, it is so hard to get any money out of that fund, right?
How come?
In a year, you can have like 10 billion in a fund, in the emergency fund. But the law says you can only access 2% of that fund in any given year. So what's the point of having so much resources? You can only access 2%.
2% of
right?
2%.
2%, yeah. And even that 2%, you have to go through so many hoops to access and give a justification why you can use that money. So you a certificate signed by who? God has to be there. You have to call the Pope. Like, it's so difficult, right? So some of these things are starting to show. We need to
But
now
it's coming out
revisit these
of
things.
knowing our government. If you actually gave that money and you allowed the National Treasury to dip its hands at any time,
Yeah.
there
would
be
be
a-
no
They'll have
fund.
many emergencies.
There would be no emergency fund.
There'll be many emergencies every now and then.
Key. Accountability is key, but you need to be reasonable. So that when a real emergency happens, you're not deploying that money 5 years after the emergency has happened,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So we need to be practical. And I agree, that people will dip their hands. Yeah, but we need to think about, we have experts in this country on, citizen engagement, CIDRI, accountability.
Yeah.
Think about the next level of accountability and how we can make things fast moving yet accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a large opportunity there.
All right. So, I mean, as we're looking at things, if we're going to give a forecast and say this is where we've come from, this is where we are, this is where we are going. I mean, it doesn't look very encouraging in the coming days or years. But even as the budget is given, and hoping that it will look at things that are important or pertinent right now. Do you see a situation, or how can we then foster a situation where things will actually start to get better by making, right decisions? Can we see that? Is that in the forecast at all?
I think it could be if we took this opportunity now where things have slowed down and people are rethinking things, if we took this time to rejigger the way government works,
Yep.
it would be so useful. Right? There are some very smart people who are thinking of ways to do this. Yeah, it just depends on whether they're heard. Right? The challenge is that also that government is hearing so many different things from very, very different quarters. Right? The international bodies are coming with all their money and their conditionalities and their advice. The private sector is also making noise. The churches are there, CIDRI CSOs are there, and everybody is coming with their own piece of advice, yeah. And some of them are very valid and some of them are not very valid. So even the ability to sift through all the intelligence that's coming through and figure out what works and what doesn't work is a really big task. It's not fast moving. I told you, government can be an elephant. And also, you don't want to move too fast and make mistakes, right? But in a time like this, you just have to accept that some mistakes would be made, but accept that also that, we will hope that we'll get to a better situation than we're in, on the whole, at the bottom line.
Wangari, do you see us... Okay, what do you see for Kenya past this emergency state? What's your vision?
I really hope that we are able to take advantage of the situation we're in now and start building from within. Yeah, it doesn't help that the finance bill says they're going to start taxing some of the machinery that's coming into the country because they're trying to find money to plug this hole from the tax release, right? But if we're able, when this mask issue came, CIDRI, which textile industry pivoted very quickly and started producing masks. Ventilators, we needed ventilators, guys, mechanics, CIDRI, engineers in universities came together and started producing these things very cheaply.
Yep.
So the intelligence, the wherewithal is there. We just need to invest in it. Now, that's what the government needs to put their money in, research and development and innovation. And I think if we invest in our own people, we will find that we are more able to withstand shocks from within.
We can only stay hopeful, Wangari, that the government and the people that need to hear you have heard you. Yeah, that's the only thing we can do. Thank you very much for speaking to us. We understand that you'll be having a tweet chat on the Finance Bill 2020 today.
Yes, at 10 a.m. on our channel at Expertise KE.
So you'll just be there tweeting and talking about the budget. And anybody who has got questions can reach out there from 10 a.m.
Yes, please. Yes, from 10 a.m. today.
Asante sana. Have a good one. Wangari Muikia, Public Finance Management Specialist and the Lead Consultant at Expertise Global Consulting. Have a good one.
You too. Asante sana.
Bye.
online, mobile, and on radio. Twitter at SpiceFMKE.
So we'll keep doing what we do. We'll keep talking about this thing. And we expect that those people that we pay to do will do. All right? They're listening for sure. We just expect that they do. Expect that they do.
The gap between thinking capacity and action. That's where
It needs to be closed.
Yeah.
We need to oil that machine to start moving.
It is moving.
As long as you cannot even
It may
fire,
be moving backwards, but it's moving.
the way you
It's
can
moving.
fire someone, by the way, in the civil service, it's such a difficult process just to move somebody from one department to the other. It gets all political connotation. You're moving us because, now you're started to deal with the DP, so that's why you fire this person here because one time they had taken a photo with too much politicization of our civil service, too much bureaucracy in our civil service.
What we were saying back when I had a stint in government was for you, if we are working, the same thing we are working here, but if you're in Department A and I'm in B, and we're here, if I need anything done from your side, I'll need to type a letter. Then you print. Then the secretary goes through it and makes sure that there's no typos. You have gotten the reference properly, that reference number, whatever it is, the person you need to sign there, you've gotten his titles well, and all of those things. Then once it's okay, now you print out, it's signed, and it is delivered.
Across one another.
We're sitting across one
You
another.
assume this is just a day, eh? All these things that you've said, it's over
It's over days. Yeah. Then after it is done, then there's a messenger who takes it to the office that needs to sign it. Then they need to log it in a book somewhere that they've received it, stamped received, and then now it'll
come to me.
I'm already tired. I can't.
And yet, I could have just told you, this needs to happen.
Could you do this and the other? This happens in the private sector. I mean, you just stand up, go to the next desk, and you tell that person, I need this. And the, or you just shoot an email. Shoot an email, and you've copied the superiors.
Everybody needs to be, and it's for them to know, not for them to approve.
It's for their information. It's just for them to know. I can see that so-and-so asked you to do this. Did you sort them out? Yes, I did. Okay, let's move on. If somebody comes and complains, I wasn't aware, but you were copied.
You are copied.
You were copied.
You're supposed to read your email.
Yeah.
And that's enough. You are copied. So that's it. We need, I don't know.
It has to be stamped received.
By people in the same office.
Which means hard copy. Which means if there was no power, then the printer is not working. So let's wait.
Or that we don't have
to fix
money
the
for
to buy
toner.
So there's no toner.
Paper. Or the boss is not in for this week, he's gone for a capacity building training.
Bus.
He'll be back next week.
I can't.
And some of these things he cannot deal with when he's not in the office.
Yeah.
He's got to be in the office at his desk.
Sorry.
He can be in the office, but if he's upstairs in a boardroom, he will not sort this thing out. We have to wait.
No. What's today's proverb?
Until he comes to his desk.
I can't.
Today's
You
proverb.
want to go home.
The civil service. Today's proverb is from Morocco. Instruct a man, you instruct an individual. Instruct a woman, and you instruct a nation. This is self-explanatory. Keep it right here. In the next hour, yesterday we started talking about IEBC and printing of data and removing the data and what happens with the IEBC. Does it have credibility or not? So we're going to be speaking to the man who was at the helm of the IEBC when it was running the last general election. This is Ezra Chiloba.
Chiloba.
Ezra Chilobe. The man who was the CEO of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. He'll be joining us in the next hour. If you've got any questions for him, SpiceFMKE, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also you'll be able to call. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock.
Thika Road has opened up just a little bit, as has Mombasa Road. Getting into the CBD and out, in and outbound, not a problem today. Gong Road, though, we had a bit of a hold up and it still seems to be happening. Okay, I begged you guys now. I don't know why this thing is happening. Another accident involving 2 matatus at a service lane entry to Kariobangi on Outer Ring Road. And now this affects that part. It also affects Thika Road traffic. So people are not behaving, unfortunately, this morning. We know that there's less traffic. We're asking you to take it easy so that you arrive alive. Okay, Wayaki Way traffic is doing what it normally does when there is traffic. So that's how you know that everybody's back into the city. But we expect that to unfold shortly. Spice FMKE, let us know what it looks like in about half an hour. We take a last look at that. For now, it looks all right.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer,
A lot happening in the Situation Room. Well, we are taking a look at the country. So we've got floods, we've got COVID, we've got, what did you call it?
Leishmaniasis. Measles.
We've got measles.
Cholera.
We've got a new outbreak of cholera.
Swine flu.
We've got... Swine flu.
Every day, look at
Swine flu is H1N1.
every day they add one for you.
Swine flu in Kenya.
Yes. Actually, it was on, I think on Monday's paper that there were some cases of swine flu that had been recorded, I think somewhere in Rift Valley.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we've got our politics. We've got Kithure Kindiki, who is, sitting on the edge of his seat because he may no longer be the deputy speaker if the wishes of some people go. And then we're also looking at the IEBC. Wafula Chebukati, the chairman, is sitting there wondering, so for how long shall I be the chairman of IEBC? Should I start preparing for 2022? Will I even be the one managing 2022? Then yesterday we started talking about what happened to the IEBC over the weekend. They uploaded data from the 2017 general election. And then there were serious errors on that data. And they immediately pulled down that information. And we were in a bit of a disagreement on how to read this whole fiasco. I was coming from a point where I was thinking there's absolutely no way that I'd buy that it's possible for you to tell me somebody, a candidate, somebody called Mercy Korir, who works for Standard Group, can suddenly appear on some paper indicating that Mercy Korir works for Mombasa Cement Company and is not even a doctor. I just cannot understand. When that data in physical hard form shows that Mercy Korir works for Standard Group, how can the same Mercy Korir, same ID number, same parents, same village, same birth certificate number be now a clinker operator at Mombasa Cement? How is that possible? All right. And I was just raising those questions. And then one of the people who was listening in was the former IEBC CEO, Ezra Chiloba. And now we'd like to reach out to him and speak to him because, first of all, we'd like to understand this data that was being uploaded on the internet, on their website, the IEBC, over the weekend. What kind of data is it? And is it the first time that they're uploading this kind of data? How do they collect this data? How do they store this data during all this period? How do they even deal with the data in terms of reading the data? How does the IEBC make use of the data that they collect? Because as long as you're registering as voters and you're going to participate in an election, there's a lot of data that's being captured countrywide. What does that mean? Ezra Chiloba, good morning.
Morning, Eric.
Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much. I actually didn't know you exist. I told you that yesterday.
Welcome to the room. This room is not as hot as the one you left at the IEBC.
We'll see.
But it's a few degrees less hot, but it's still hot. Now, listen, you were there at the IEBC. First of all, where are you? Are you Nairobi? Are you in Kenya? You know, IEBC people now we no longer know where they are.
I'm no longer IEBC. So I used to be. It's been over 2 years since I left, I think.
Yep.
At the moment, for the last about 60 days, I've been in Kitale, the best place to be at the moment, as we monitor the development around COVID-19 and many other things.
So this is what they call deep quarantine.
There's a bit of freedom. It's not the cell-like type that you guys are experiencing in Nairobi skyscrapers and stuff like that. At least it's fresh air out here.
True. So now let's talk about the 2017 general election. A lot of hue and cry. The matter of the presidential election went into a petition. And then there was a standoff and many disagreements, the calls for you and your chairman to leave, you and your chairman not seeing eye to eye on some issues, some IEBC commissioners leaving or saying that they had not left, but then they have left again. But then let's leave and set that aside and look at the data. There was a lot of information that was collected by IEBC. The election that you conducted in 2017 was mainly electronic in terms of transmission of the data, and therefore also we assume storage of that data. And then data is uploaded onto the IEBC website, and it shows completely different things from the situation on the ground as we speak.
Yeah, I had the privilege to look at that the report that was uploaded, then removed from the website. One, I have to mention that if you look at the history of election data in this country, perhaps there's no any other year that we have rich data on elections like the 2017 election. The Commission, I think, has results for presidential election, all the seats, and the results are not just at that top level. You should be able to access the results all the way to the polling station. And I've looked at the data, historical data. Nowhere will you find data like that other than on the 2017 election. So it's rich data available. But the only challenge is how you make use of such a data, especially if you want to get insights into elections in Kenya. So what I saw being published was, I think, an attempt to make sense of that data, which means, of course, one is supposed to understand what that data basically means. And if you're communicating to the public, the question is, what is it that you're trying to communicate? Unfortunately, I think in the process of trying to make that sense from the large data that the Commission has, somehow things didn't go right for them.
Looking at the raw data, like you're saying, it's very rich data, and what you had in 2017 is different from what you've had previously. Even just looking at the between 2017 and 4 years earlier, 2013. What new information do you have, for example, in the presidential election that was not captured in 2013?
In terms of how to, the first thing would be, you look at the 2013 data that was made public, it focused on presidential results at the constituency level. You will not find information of the polling station results, largely because it was paper-based.
Okay.
And the results were left at the constituency offices. But for the 2017 election, the fact that we use the KIM system, you find that you can drill down the presidential results all the way to the polling station, the 40,000 plus polling station. And that data is available. It's not just for the presidential election. All the seats, including the MCS.
Yeah.
And I'll say you'll get 98% of that data in soft version. And that's available. That's why I call it rich data.
So basically, it's information that can tell you in a particular polling station, this is how a particular candidate fared. If a candidate wanted to look at this, they can even use this information to know how they're doing to prepare for the next election.
Very well said.
And it will, of course, now take it down from presidential all the way to the ward rep, the MCA position. So if this information is already in soft copy, and I'm assuming that when you're playing around, when you're working with this information and you want to now break it down into how you want to present it to the people, you'll grab information from this column or from this side and put it together so that it makes sense. How possible then is it for Millie Odhiambo to appear in a different political party in a different constituency, for example?
Well, I mean, if you're not careful when you're dealing with the sensitive data, you're likely going to make mistakes. If you're going to do it manually, it means that then your quality assurance system must be so robust so that you avoid some of those mistakes. It happens when you're dealing with huge data. But I think the idea when we were setting up the system then was for you to, as much as possible, avail this information in a format that is easy to access and do your own independent analysis.
Yep.
I will not try to transfer the data that is from 40,000 polling stations into a 700-page document in PDF to try to make it public. That is difficult. You can't do that. I think using an online platform perhaps could have been easier.
Yeah.
So that someone like Eric, you can go there and use a query system that will allow you to be able to drill down what exactly the type of data you're looking for. So try to make it manual, translating from a digital format into paper-based format, using huge data, you're going to make mistakes.
And that sounds a bit obvious. I mean, you already have a platform. You already have this platform called the IEBC.co.ke was the one that we were using to look at for results in 2017. You could go in and query to specific constituency, specific polling station, and you see the results then. So why not use the same to post the data? Why try and break it down into 700 pages of a PDF?
I mean, they could be having a reason as to why they did that, but I don't think the best way to do it. It's not the most efficient. It's not the most useful. I think what they need to do is to have just a summarized, maybe 20 pages of insight of what they derive from the data and make the rest available online for anyone else to access. But trying to transport data, I think they're going to make mistakes.
So, as we're looking at 2017 at that point, and then 2018, assuming that there was a time frame that would have been given to share this information, was this done then?
No,
this easier format of information dissemination, was it done at that time?
No, the information is available. I think the only challenge that the Commission faced is that immediately after the election, we got into other internal issues that kind of distracted the institution from focusing what was more important. Yeah, so I think all these last few years, if you look at what has been happening, I think we basically got ourselves as a country in a situation that we could not get ourselves out immediately. Otherwise, this report ought to have been out as early as 6 months after the election.
So the reason why this information then was not made available to Kenyans at the time when it should have been was because of the internal wrangles that we saw taking place. Internal, external, however you want to look at it. The reason why this information was not shared at that time was because of this.
I mean, that from where I see it, that could explain why, because I understand a little bit of how the institution works. I think at some point there was a lot of fear. No one wants to take any decision on anything.
Yeah.
A lot of inquiries being undertaken by, parliamentary committees. The commission itself tried to carry out its own internal investigations. People resigning. So the environment kind of changed. So people got into this mode of, I want to survive. So they were not focused on what they were supposed to do.
So people were not working. People were basically on survival mode.
Exactly.
Everybody looking over their backs. Who's got a dagger?
Exactly. That's my view.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my. Let's look at that data. The data that you saw before you left the commission, the data that you saw coming in. And I would imagine that would also give a picture of how our electoral system works, the kind of challenges and wins that we have in our electoral system. What were you able to glean out of it, just, casually speaking?
Okay. First of all, I think I should also mention that since I left 2 years ago, I've been trying to work with some few individuals to put together historical data on elections since 1945 and try to see if we can make it available to the public. Working with some team called the Kenya Election Database and data science. So in the process, of course, we've looked at the 2017 election based on the information that was posted online before this. And you discover that our electoral system perhaps contributes a lot to the issues around trust and in the electoral process generally. And when we look, for example, at the National Assembly representation, you got 15 million people who went to the polling station to vote. And out of those who voted, only 8.5 million seats count. 8.5 million votes counted for something. That is, turned those votes into seats.
Okay.
6.5 million guys voted, went home, and they did not see any impact at all in Parliament. Then you find that out of 65 contesting political parties, only 21 got represented in the National Assembly. And even more interesting is that some political parties that won as little as 67,000 votes have 4 seats in the National Assembly, while other political parties with an equal number of votes, or even much more, have only 1 seat or no seat at all. So people kind of, when you get such a situation, is that people kind of get disillusioned. It's a process.
Yeah.
They go to vote, but when they go back home, they find that their vote is not.
It didn't matter.
For anything.
Yeah.
It didn't matter at all. And even more interesting, you find that the people who are actually in Parliament, who were elected by less than 30% of people who went to vote.
Yeah.
So, in fact, in MCA is a worse off situation. We have guys who are elected by 16% of the votes that were cast, which means 84%
are not represented.
People voted, they are not represented. So you find this disillusionment, discontent, and mistrust of the electoral process, partly because of such outcomes. Just because of our electoral system.
So what I hear you say is basically, if you just translate it directly, out of 15 million people who went to cast their votes for an MP, only 8 million of those votes translated to an MP actually getting into Parliament. So basically, close to half of the people who went to vote for MP did not get their candidate elected.
Exactly.
Close to half feel that the person who is in office right now does not represent them.
You got it right.
And therefore, this means that
And
close
even
to
more
half
interest-
of those people feel that IEBC, their election was stolen or was manipulated or was interfered with in one way or the other.
Exactly.
All right.
Isn't that the nature of democracy? That the majority, 50% plus one, will have their way, and you as a minority, the rest, you had your say, you had your chance. You should have mobilized some more.
But now here, see, if just before you come in, Ezra, he's just given us the example of the MCAs. In some cases, only 17% have their MCA in office. The other
exactly.
83%, which is the majority, are not represented. The person who's in office is not the person that they are chosen.
But how come then?
But
Many candidates. We have 40 candidates in a
Yeah,
contesting a
exactly.
seat.
It's democracy.
How
It's democracy.
Everybody's running around the circus trying to get a piece of the pie, and then that's what democracy means in this
Yeah.
case. And so somebody's bound to be upset, and somebody is bound to come out the victor. I don't think it has anything to. At some point,
But
if you look at it,
should
it's
the
not-
majority be upset?
But-
Those are the questions that I think we should be asking. If 87% are feeling, look, yes, we have 40 candidates, yes, but this person who has won has only gotten 10% of the vote of everybody else, maybe that's why we should be calling for runoffs everywhere.
No, but you should have done your pre-election processes better.
How?
But-
Bring parties together if you need to, ask some people to support others. I don't know, find a way of making sure that that's the nature of democracy, that your best candidate is the one that most of you will support, so that you minimize all these conflicts that are out here. It's democracy.
You start locking out candidates' issues. Ezra, come in.
Yeah, actually, I think, that is exactly the debate that we need to be having. What is the reason of us having the type of electoral system that we have? If after every election we have complaints, if after every election, of course, people complain about rigging and stuff like that, what is really the problem? And I think in a democracy, what we always say is that a good electoral system should be one that enhances what we call the equality of the vote. One person, one vote.
Mm-hmm.
Is one that in a society like ours that gives us fair representation. It must be inclusive, and it must be realistic, looking at the political realities of the day. In our country, ethnicity is core. So if you design an electoral system that is not consistent with these values, then you're going to have a lot of discontent, in as much as you call it democracy.
The IEBC.
And my take is that there's only so much that the Commission can do. The IEBC's responsibility is to implement the electoral system. But then political parties have to be organized in such a way that whatever outcome comes out is reflective also of the majority, of the will of the majority.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. The IEBC in this country seems to have a taint on its image from time immemorial. And unfortunately, or however you choose to look at it, the person sitting at the helm of the IEBC at any one time during an election obviously walked away with some of that responsibility on his shoulders. It's always been men in this case, so we'll say his. You also bore the brunt of a lot of those attacks. Why do you think this was?
I don't know.
Really? You can be honest. The situation won't kick you out for being honest.
No, exactly the same. I've spent two years outside, the political space, and I've been asking myself, reflecting on why things end up the way they end up. And I can say I don't want to pretend that I know the answer. So, and the reason I took up this idea of trying to analyze data and look at the patterns of voting and why there's a lot of discontent in a society like ours. So I think that this goes beyond the IEBC, and it's much more to do with how our society works and how our politics work. And there's a lot of mystery around the IEBC. Some people think it's a very powerful organization, while it's not, or maybe it is. So there's a lot of this perceptive things. I, as an individual, when I walk in the street, so busy on the farm and I meet people, they tell me stories about elections, and I wonder where they get all these things from. So there's a perception that's been created around the institution that's not necessarily true. And I think becomes an easier way of explaining a lot of failed institutional architecture and processes of our elections across the board.
Well, one of those narratives, Ezra, is that the results of an election were bungled under your watch, right? I mean, that's one of the things that's out there. It's public perception. It's a narrative that is still being strung by quite a number of people. Now, here you are on the periphery of it all now and saying that you're not really sure what may have happened. How is a country supposed to move away from this, whereby every time there was an election, there was always an issue around the IEBC and the individual who sat at the position where things were supposed to have been moved or shaken? How do we get people away from that, to divorce them from that when something goes wrong during an election in Kenya, the IEBC is at the heart of it all, every single time?
I mean, my thoughts would be like, we have to have a honest reflection on our entire electoral system. The trouble I've seen is that it has always been reactive, and then it's short-termist. We don't look at the long-term consequences of the decisions that we make today. I was in the commission for only 3 years. I think I got there when it was about 28 or so months to the election. And we were having the same situation as it is now. Suspense and uncertainty about the future. And, went there with the idea that we're going to reform, cost change, and get ready for the election. We did what we could. But before long, of course, there was a lot of changes that happened in between. And that affected the manner in which we also got, in which we prepared for the election. And I mean, a lot might be said, but there's a lot of very competent people in that organization. And what they need is to facilitate them to be able to deliver better. But what has happened is that after every election, we descend with the institution, we cause unnecessary fear, and in that situation, you cannot really perform well.
Nobody's going to move.
No, so we're not having a honest conversation about how we can build credible institutions.
Are we willing to have an honest conversation? I'm taking you where I always sit, and where I sit is, as long as politicians have control of this process or in the driver's seat, they're not willing to have an honest conversation. We must have somebody to blame for my loss.
Unfortunately, you cannot do away with it. They have stakes in this.
Reduce their stake. So, don't do away with them.
I mean, the thing is that you cannot have a commission without the intervention of the political parties, which is basically parliament, through parliament or through the executive. We must strengthen our institution, but since they have a stake, they want to play a role. They're expected to play a role. But the question is, are we basing our decision based on information that is reliable and one that can inform a long-term, give us a long-term solution to the issue that we face?
With all of this,
that's what we don't have.
Does the vote count for Kenyans? Because we talk about the representation thereafter when you see results, and then people may not be happy. And the question is that many people are asking themselves now that we're rallying around something. And again, a narrative, whether it's spun in the imaginations of people's minds or otherwise, is that your vote at the end of the day doesn't count. And then you have voter apathy. So does the vote matter right now for people to see their desired leader in a position of government or leadership? As things stand today, does it count?
No, I think, it's a question that we need to pose to everyone. I think a vote counts if, for example, those who are elected are able to do what the voters expect them to do. And it's something that then they have to be held to account at the next election. So I cannot really answer that now. But in terms of the process, if somebody goes to the polling station and votes, and his vote does not, or his or her vote does not turn out to be meaningful in terms of representation, we must query that.
Okay,
We've
let's
always-
query it now, Ezra.
So
let's
how
query
do we
it
make
now.
it meaningful?
Let's take it 2 years back,
Yeah.
for example, and people went to the ballot and they put down their vote for whatever they wanted to do. 3 years back now, 2017. At that point, when you were in that position, were you expectant that Kenyans would now birth the results of their vote and say, yes, the leader that I have chosen is the person who is in government or is in parliament or wherever they are? At that point, from where you were sitting, did the vote of the Kenyan matter? Did it
In
count
terms of process,
for you?
In terms of process, actually did. I mean, it did. There's been a lot of discussion and noise about what went wrong, what went right.
Yeah.
I think the idea that the fact that the presidential election of August 8 was nullified kind of clouded all the other processes. If you look at the data in IEBC, for example, when people went to court to challenge the election based on what had happened at the presidential election, out of 300 petitions, the commission won all of them except 2, I think. So you can see that from the evidence available, I think we did a very good job at the time. So that counts for something. Now, the question is whether there are lessons we learn from that process going into the future so that we make electoral outcomes more acceptable. So that is where the challenge is. And the commission, yes, yeah.
In your own post-mortem analysis of that situation, you said there are many conversations about what went right, what went wrong. In your own analysis, having been there in the thick of things, what went wrong?
My take has been that it was beyond the technical aspects of the election management. I think largely we underestimated the impact of the social aspects of the election. We underestimated the impact of the political players. And what we could have improved perhaps is trying to engage more with political parties so that we have a common understanding of what the election entails. And by the way, this goes all the way to the Supreme Court. We always say that had we had a better relationship in terms of explaining the electoral process with other critical stakeholders, including the judiciary, for example, the use of ICT, we will have had a slightly different outcome. But seemingly, we ran on our own. Other institutions ran on their own. And in between, there was political pressure in terms of, not to just in the but political pressure in the sense that a lot more demand from political players. And that kind of clouded us from not appreciating those social challenges. And I think even in future, unless we have a mechanism that allows these groups to vent properly and accept the process, we are likely just going to go back at the same situation.
So the issue is about trust and mistrust of the commission.
Yeah.
If we don't build trust in this commission. So let's take a short break, take a look at traffic. And when we come back, we continue this conversation. And this time, let's focus on how do we build trust for not just the commission, but our entire electoral process from the very beginning to the end. Even now, 25 months into the next general election, do we trust the process? Do we trust that, from the very beginning, from registering as a voter to changing your polling station to identifying a polling, do we trust that process? And what is it that can be done to change this and what we have in the country? 26 minutes to 10 o'clock. On the line with us is Ezra Chiloba, former Chief Executive Officer of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. We are discussing the 2017 general election and all the previous elections and the hot topic now emerging again, electoral reforms in the country. Good morning.
A little bit of traffic right in the CBD. Thika Road, avoid the service lane if you can because it's fully packed this morning trying to get into the city. Interestingly, outbound as well. So the rumble strips right along Langata Road have been removed, and so it seems that people are moving a lot faster than they should be. Hopefully we can slow that down a little bit, guys, because accidents are rampant, unfortunately. So traffic seems to have stemmed out a little bit. It's not as crazy as it was a little bit earlier, and so it looks good. Probably not going to build up again until later on in the day. Don't forget Spice FM KE. You can send anything that you do see. We'll share it out the best we can through the day.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's the situation room. In the room, we have Dr. Nduoko and
Spice up your life.
Joining us on the line is Ezra Chiloba, the man who was at the driver's seat at the helm of the IEBC during the 2017 general election. We are taking an audit of what happened in the 2017 election, the lessons that we take from that, and what we need to do going forward. Ezra, before we went to the break, you were asked by Dr. Masi what went wrong. And he said you seemed to have focused a lot on the technical side of things and you forgot the other side of things, which is the soft side of things, which brings in the issue of trust and mistrust of our electoral process. And you've even alluded to that yourself by when earlier you had talked about if people don't feel like they trust the system, then it doesn't matter. Even if 90% people vote for one candidate, the other 10% will still feel like they lost. What is it? What's the cause of this deep mistrust with the system?
Well, I think it's about what people take election to mean for them. Our elections generally, we look at it, is the ethnic best when it comes to representation. So losing means the whole community loses. Mm. And the fact also that they tend to associate development to winning an election. So that sense that they've lost. So basically they've lost the development opportunity. Contributes to that. But also it's the way the players, for example, the candidates, conduct themselves in the election. Mm-hmm. They promise perhaps what they cannot deliver. And sometimes they look for the shortest route, which is to exploit the vulnerabilities of people. And when they go to the ballot, they lose. People are left wondering what next. Yeah. So a little bit of the conduct of the political players themselves, a little bit of the nature of our political process, ethnic best, and this expectation that winning is about development, and we have this attitude of winner take all. I would rather win and the other guy loses. I think we need to get to a place whereby we build a society that appreciates everyone being around the table. And that's why we have to revisit our electoral system at some point in the future.
What drives this expectation, though? What is it that makes people expect that this is what I'm going to get when I participate in an election? It can't be that this is our education system. 844 has not made us believe that if I vote for somebody of my tribe, I'm going to get the goodies. What exactly is it that has driven us to this point?
Maybe Dr. Masi should tell us. I assume that a political scientist. He should tell us why our society behaves the way it behaves. And there's a historical pattern towards it. I once read an article by a guy called Joel Backen. He talks about agrarian societies, why people vote for their MPs. Mm-hmm. They do not vote for their MPs for purposes of legislation, oversight, and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. In agrarian societies, where basically rural-based communities, people look at development from pipe water, they want to see schools. So they vote for these people to bring those things to them. So the role of the legislature is no longer, historically has not been legislation and oversight, but rather development.
It's bringing development to
that kind of has been embedded into our system, and we need to get it to a point where perhaps we need to overcome that. But that's really our history, based on some scholarly work done by some people. But I really do not understand why we have not been able to break from that, even under new constitutional dispensation.
But something that you have the laws are in place, and the IEBC has been given the mandate, is to control the conduct of the candidates during campaigns. Why is this so hard to put in check when candidates go around the country? And our colleague Siti Muga keeps talking about this all the time. A politician will come and promise you the moon, and you have absolutely nothing to hold them to account them on. I mean, but IEBC has got the power somehow to ensure that these candidates are conducting themselves in a different way. Why is it so hard for IEBC to do this?
No, I think Eric, that is giving IEBC too much credit and and power that it does not have. IEBC is not responsible for political accountability of candidates. Candidates are accountable to their electors. So if you choose to elect someone, then the only way to hold them to account is either to use the recall clauses in the law or in the next election.
Ezra, I'd like to look at it, sorry to butt in, but I'd like to look at it from this point where IEBC is responsible for vetting candidates and allowing, giving clearance for them to vie. But here we have cases, many, of where candidates, some, as people would make jokes about, they cannot even be the chairman of their local cattle dips, are given a go-ahead by IEBC. Some have cases that have tainted images, yet they get clearance, you can vie. For me, that is the first point where IEBC can make sure that the quality of candidates who the electorate has to pick from then is good, and not people who at the end of the day will come and promise a lot of air and then dupe the electorate into something else.
No, I think also that there's been a misapplication of that provision of law where we're supposed to vet and clear candidates. The vetting process, from our understanding, was that it was multi-institutional. You need to clear by different agencies, ESCC, KRA, HELB, and many other institutions. So when these candidates bring their documents to IEBC, they'll bring all those documents. And since we receive these documents as confirmation that these people are fit to run, we execute that. And of course, there's another bit about it. If somebody is in court, is been persecuted but not convicted, the practice has been that you do not deny that person a chance unless they've been convicted for that offense. And that, I think, the principle of the rules of natural justice. So that is where we actually differ from other stakeholders' views. People want to see that once you're negatively mentioned out there, IEBC has to step in to deny you an opportunity to run. I think that leads us to more subjective vetting process, which is also biased and perhaps not good for the institution.
And then that's where the responsibility of the voter comes in. I mean, if you believe that this person, you could not have elected this person to be the chairman of a cattle dip, why are you electing them to be MCA or councillor or senator or woman rep? Governor or president? But then we like I always think, we like passing on the blame to this one institution or to somebody else. As long as we can point to someone else and say, you are the one who's failed me for my poor decision making. It's human nature.
It's human nature. You always have to point a finger somewhere. You have to find somebody to blame or to cast to blame for all your shortfalls things. But you see, we have an electorate, different kinds. They're literate. We have varied forms of people, and our institutions, in my opinion, should be able to safeguard, and as I always say, should be able to safeguard the most vulnerable, those that are not able to make their own independent choices. And if it means, even if it's being subjective or delaying, I don't know, there has to be something. There has to be something that can be done to protect the most vulnerable
in the society.
Exactly.
How would we do this?
The only way to do that is to have an objective criteria. Never ever trust the human mind when it's making judgment, because it is biased. So you as an arbiter, you have to just stick to the rules that try to accommodate everyone. So the assumption we make is that law is the equalizer. So if you leave it to the human mind is very deceptive and cunning, so you don't want to get there. That's why if you come to the institution like the IEBC, some of those officers, you hear about them or you see them. When you meet them in person, you wonder. They're just simple individuals who are dedicated to their job.
He's a good guy.
He can
buy a drink.
Exactly. So my take is that we look at an objective criteria that allows us to run our institution much better. That's the critical factor.
Let's talk about electoral reforms now. March talked about, and now I'm going to play you some reggae again. BBI has some of the recommendations on what we need to do for electoral reforms. Among them is, first, let's reconstitute the IEBC, and then others. There has been talk of looking at the voting system, going into proportional representation, where you're talking about political parties now campaigning for political parties, and the party that gets a vote, or whatever kind of proportional representation is adopted. But at least it says that every vote at this point will count. It will have some weight. There are those that have also argued for weighted voting, where some people's vote carries more weight than others. So let's start with proportional representation. From what I heard you talking about, looking at a constituency and seeing very many people who voted and their vote didn't count. What's your view on this?
Well, I'm a proponent of proportional representation when it comes to parliamentary representation. And the reason is that when you read a lot of literature about how societies craft political institutions to ensure there is political stability and cohesion, a lot of these societies that look like ours, which is basically multi-ethnic, high levels of polarization, and high risk when it comes to conflict, they adopt systems that are more proportional as opposed to our case. If you look at Boma's process, there was a proposal to actually move our electoral system from what we call the first past the post to mixed member proportional representation. But that was abandoned. And the explanation the committee gave? Let's go for what we are used to. That is what is written in that particular report, without giving a deeper reflection of the implication of that decision.
Of what we're used to.
Exactly. So if you look at the proportional representation, in simple terms, it basically means seats in the parliament should be allocated to political parties based on the strength of their votes across the country or their region. And if you do that, for example, we looked at the 2017 election, and we try to build scenarios in terms of what it will mean if, for example, the total number of votes cast were redistributed to achieve proportional representation. And it was interesting to observe that if we redistribute the seats proportionate to the seats at the national level, we'll get 99% equal representation. And if we scale it down and say, let's do proportional representation at the county level, you find that from the 6 million votes, 6.5 million votes that I mentioned earlier that do not have representation, that number is reduced down to 1.2 million votes or thereabouts, which means it's a more equal system.
Yeah.
It's more proportionate system. And that is how societies that are polarized actually harness the power of proportional representation to achieve stability.
Just explain this practically. If we were to look at proportional representation, if we went into 2017 with a mixed member proportional representation method, how would I as a voter have participated in this?
Well, it also depends on the type of proportional representation, but simply it means that instead of going to vote for a specific candidate, you vote for a political party.
Okay.
So you assume that the political party is a strong institution that is able to mobilize and organize and able to recruit candidates who will make the political party attractive. So you vote for the political party, and then at the end of the voting, when we count results, we determine a number we call a quota. Basically, we take the number of seats available, divide by the number of votes that have been cast, and start allocating seats based on that quota. So if you get 50% of the votes, you're more likely going to, as a political party, you're going to be allocated
more seats,
50% of the seats, of the seats available. Now, of course, the challenge we have in our country is that we have constituencies. Traditionally, we have always voted on the basis of constituencies.
Yes.
If you tell people now you want to go vote for political parties, they'll be like, you want to introduce us to those guys again?
Yeah.
You know, because political parties in our country are not that strong.
It's individuals.
And it's much around individuals. But I think we need to make we need to take a decision that will lead us to start institutionalizing our political parties.
When you say we, Ezra, you say we need to take a decision, we need to make a decision. Who is we here?
As a country, I'm talking about as a country, because eventually changing the electoral system is a responsibility.
I understand that as a country. However, when you say we, are we talking about the people? Because then what mechanisms then for pushing of change then do people have? Because obviously it's something that needs to change. The representation of the people when it comes to an election it can be few and far between if you want to look at it and be honest about it. So if people are pushing for change, or if people are pushing for this kind of representation, then what must be done? Because I'm assuming then you're talking about the electorate, the masses of the people, then whose interests are most vested. How is this supposed to happen when we have and there's certain factors that would affect this? We have, as we've already talked about, politicians whose interests are above more about themselves more than anything else. We have a commission who unfortunately has a tainted image. We have development systems which are not in place, right? So then how will the we then clamor for any kind of change practically?
No, I mean, it's obvious to me that we already have a legal framework in place, which is the Constitution, which allows us to amend the same Constitution through a parliamentary process or through referendum. So the changes will not happen unless we have a referendum happening. So the question is, who will propose these changes? So initially I used to think that, Punguza Mzigo, when they were thinking about this, they would have come up with something that will address the electoral system. But no one has been courageous enough to come forward and say, this is the kind of electoral system that we need to have in place, and therefore making a proposal for constitutional change, collect 1 million signatures, let's have the assembly approve, and let's get this thing done for a referendum. That's the only way you're supposed to change this in our context.
If you were to go back,
yeah.
if you were to go back,
To IEBC.
some act
today.
of God happened, and you were to go back. Do you have any regrets? What would you change for? What would you change for any kind of different outcome?
Outcome for who, really?
Let's talk about these masses that you seem to be so concerned about at this point.
The people.
For the people.
It's always about the people.
It's about the people. It should be.
And I mean, it's about the people, but again, the things we're talking about go beyond the IEBC.
Okay.
Constitutional change is not the responsibility of IEBC. It's the responsibility of any Kenyan.
That's fine.
So-
So let's take all those
Okay,
things into
what-
consideration then and say, would you change anything about the way in which you
IEBC
operated?
runs.
Would you change anything about how
Yes,
you
yes.
operated or how IEBC runs?
Of course, the lessons we learned from the last election. And from an institutional point of view, of course, a number of things we may need to look at to improve the performance of the institution. One is how we manage our stakeholders. I think is critical. I think what people do not know is very difficult to work with political parties. We had forums such as the political parties liaison committee. That never really worked. And as much as it was in law, we will have meetings, and those meetings lead to nothing. So we'll have to devise a strategy of how to constructively engage with the political parties. We'll have to devise a strategy that will enable us to have a better relationship with other players like the judiciary. But most importantly, I think from an operational point of view, because if you look at the nullification of the presidential election, it was based on the form and not on the substance of the election. So how do we improve our processes to ensure that we get things right, or we design systems that everyone else understands what we are doing? So what happened in 2017, I think there was a lot of faith in the technology, which very few people understood. And that kind of clouded the entire process.
Yeah.
But
Sure, because it made it seem as if then nobody knew what they were doing, and people are still asking for the service to be opened. How are we getting data that is
Exactly,
typographical
and-
out of a database, for crying out loud? So of course, and those
I
questions
mean,
or that mistrust is actually very it's valuable at this point, I think.
I mean, it's because maybe the commission has not come out proactively to say these are the things that we observed, and this is how we want to improve. And also, I don't think the commission has been consistent with the position that it wants to hold on some of those things. For me, my view has been consistent throughout in terms of what I thought happened in the election, and in terms of what needs to be worked on. So I think it's high time that the commission will say, hey, these are the lessons learned. The mistakes that were made were this, and this is how we've improved on, and we intend to improve. And even these improvements, as much as we make them, there are certain limitations. I think there was overpromise of using IT in the election, and without emphasizing the limitation. And anytime we try to de-emphasize the use of technology in election, then you became anti-reform and progressive.
Yeah.
And I think this is the time now to talk about the reality around the use of technology in
doable.
election. Commission plays that critical role in doing just that.
Ezra Chiloba, Kitale Farmer, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Yeah, this is a place to be. And once in a while, you have to take a break. Come to Kitale. It's a beautiful place.
Asante sana. Have a good one. And
Asante sana.
and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Caregiver.
Well, we're coming to the top of the hour. I'll ask you to give your closing remarks, and then I'll close with today's proverb. Oh, you can do that. Teach a woman, teach a man. You can do that.
What?
Okay. Dr. Masi, say goodbye. Wachana na ndu.
Tuachane na Miss Fantastic.
Tomorrow, I have an adjective already for tomorrow.
It's ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I work in advance. I plan ahead.
Yeah.
Good people, let's wait for Ndu's adjective tomorrow. Tuonane kesho.
Stay safe.
Wait for my adjective tomorrow. Say
Wait
that.
for it. Wait for it.
Okay. Today's proverb: instruct a man and you instruct an individual. Instruct a woman, you instruct a nation. If you don't understand that, turn to your neighbor and ask them. They know what that means. Good morning. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Join us again tomorrow, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Now until 2 p.m. is uninterrupted music. And then you'll be on Spice Drive with Monique. And then the adults in the room will be here from 7 to 10. Bye-bye.